Good afternoon, everyone. We're extremely happy to have you all here today. This is a very momentous occasion. My name is Ryan Mack. I'm the president of the Mid-Atlantic region for Operation Hope. Just a quick anecdote I like to tell. A man walks into a bar, and this man is a racist man. And he walks over to the bar, and he sits down in the bar, and he sees a man of color sitting at the bar, and he says, "You know what? Drinks on the house on me, except for that man right there." And everybody gets a drink, and everybody's drinking and having fun, but the man of color is just sitting there and not fazed. So the man says, "Doggone it, meal on me and dessert as well on me. Everyone in the house except for that man right there." And so everybody's eating the dessert, and everything's going well. And the man of color is just sitting there unfazed. So the man says, "Doggone it, bartender, I've done everything in the world to get that guy upset. How come he's not mad?" He said, "Who are you talking about?" He said, "That man right there, that man of color, right at the end of the bar." He says, "Oh, him? Oh, he owns the bar." And so the moral of the story is that as many negative L's that we have in our society, a lot of those negative L's can be mitigated, and the impacts of all of them can be minimized with ownership. And Lincoln understood this, and when he mandated the Freedmen's Bank 150 years ago today, Dr. Martin Luther King understood this when he organized his Poor Man's March, and sadly was assassinated before he was able to do it. And that's why today is just so important. Today is all about inclusive economics. Today is all about understanding the values that we have and making sure that we know that it's not about learning how to waiting on our ship to come in. It's about learning how to swim out to the ship. It's not about if life gives you lemons, make lemonade. It's all about if life gives you lemons, throw them back and go get what you want. And that's what economic inclusion is all about. That's what Operation Hope is all about. So today I welcome you. And we have a very fabulous program here today. And I will tell you, I'm so excited. With the speakers are all just extremely happy to be on par and ready to hopefully give you a great time and get a lot of knowledge, because I know that everyone in this room knows that none of us is as strong as all of us. And truly together we can make a better and brighter day. And so I'm going to jump right into the program with our first speaker, who I believe is truly a monarch of history. Our first guest is Deputy Archivist of the United States. In July 2011, she previously served as the agency's Chief of Staff, as Senior Special Assistant to the Archivist, and before that as Director of the Lifestyle Coordination Staff, where she was responsible for developing policies, processes, systems, and standards relating to the life of records. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Deputy Archivist of the United States, Ms. Deborah Steele-Wall.
I don't know how to follow that joke. That was fantastic. So yes, I'm Deborah Wall. I'm the Deputy Archivist, and good afternoon and welcome here to the William McGowan Theater. We're honored to have you here for the celebration of the 150th anniversary of the Freedmen's Bank. I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we do here. Thomas Jefferson said, "Information is the currency of democracy." Simply put, at the National Archives, we are the keeper of some of the most valuable of that currency, the records created by the US government. When we opened our doors in 1935, our mission was to collect, protect, and encourage the use of records of the US government, and most importantly, to make them available to the public so the public could hold their government accountable and to learn from their past. Access remains our primary mission today, and we here believe passionately that free and equal access to government records is the cornerstone of any democracy. We're the final destination of the most important records of the United States government, the 1% to 3% that are deemed permanent, to be kept permanently. We're responsible for the records of the 275 executive branch agencies and departments, the White House, Congress, and the Supreme Court. Our records start with the oaths of allegiance signed by George Washington and his troops at Valley Forge, and go all the way up to the tweets that are being created at this very moment at the White House. We have 12 billion pieces of paper, that's a B with a billion with a B, 42 million photographs, miles and miles of films and video, and more than 5 billion electronic records, and that number is increasing exponentially every day. We have 3,000 employees in 44 facilities across the country, including 13 presidential libraries. One of our busiest facilities is the National Personnel Records Centers in St. Louis, where we hold up the records of 56 million veterans. In this building, we hold the records of the Freedmen's Bureau and the Freedmen's Bank, which you're here to commemorate today. These documents are tangible reminders of where we have been and where we need to go. Thank you for joining us for this afternoon's program, particularly in light of the questionable weather. It's an honor to have you here. Thank you.
And on today, we're going to have a change of agenda, and we're going to put the heavy hitters first, so to speak. And I would like to introduce our panel. Yes, sir. Well, the first guest that we have on our panel today is Miss Donna Owens. If we can please welcome Donna Owens to the panel discussion. An award-winning journalist who serves as a reporter, producer, and editor for the print, broadcast, and digital media outlets nationwide. She contributes regularly to Essence Magazine, NPR, Baltimore Sun, and NBC. Her byline has appeared in Ebony, Black Enterprise, Chicago Tribune, Los Angeles Times, AOL, MSNBC.com, and more. Please give another hand for Miss Donna Owens. Our next guest is from the Office of the Comptroller and the Currency's Deputy Comptroller for Community Affairs, where he leads a Department of Community Development professionals located here in Washington, D.C. and the OCC districts. He leads a staff responsible for outreach to banks and their community partners, the development of policy, and the creation of distribution of educational materials on community development. Prior to joining the OCC in 1999, he was director of affordable housing sales at Freddie Mac. Please give a warm welcome to Deputy Comptroller Community Affairs, Mr. Barry Wise. Our next guest is a civil rights entrepreneur and businessman, author, thought leader, and philanthropist. He has been an advisor to the last 3 sitting U.S. presidents and is currently a member of the President's Advisory Council on Financial Capability for Young Americans. He is also the best-selling author of 2 books. His most recent, How the Poor Can Save Capitalism, is a top 10 book for 2014 for Essence Magazine, a top business book for 2014 for CEO Read and Business Plus Strategy, and is the only best-selling author on economics in the world, authored by an African-American. Please welcome founder, chairman, CEO of Operation Hope, and my boss, Mr. John Hope Bryan. And today, I want to thank you very much because we have a special guest, and her long list of accomplishments is more than just one alone. I'm sorry, one second here. She is a chief executive officer of the King Center, who was founded by her mother in 1968. She's an internationally renowned orator who spoke in her mother's stead at the United Nations at the age of 17. She is a graduate of Spelman College with a BA in psychology and earned a Master's of Divinity and doctorates of law degrees from Emory University. The youngest daughter of the late Coretta Scott King and Dr. Martin Luther King, she continues the legacy of nonviolence through such initiatives such as Be a King of Nonviolence 365. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Bernice A. King. And our final guest hardly needs an introduction, but his list of accomplishments more than merit one. He was a key confidant and strategist to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. during his recent critical years of the civil rights movement. In 1972, he was elected to represent Georgia's 5th District, unbelievably the first African-American elected from the South since Reconstruction. He was appointed by President Carter to serve as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. He served as mayor of Atlanta from 1982 to 1990, bringing jobs and $70 billion in private investment. His many awards include the President Medal of Freedom and Francis Legion d'Honneur, the nation's greatest honor. The man who needs no introduction. Is our distinct privilege to welcome Ambassador Andrew Young. And I have the distinct privilege to introducing my good and dear friend and longtime fraternity brother you've seen him on News One, you've seen him on CNN as a pundit, you've seen him at every hot breaking news story that we've seen across the country. Dear friend of mine, Roland Martin. You done? All right.
We're certainly glad to be here. We want to get right to it. We got several folks who've got planes to catches, and they want to avoid the snow. Ain't that bad? Although DC does not know how to handle a little snow. That's been 6 years in Chicago. I want to start this way. About 15 years ago, I'm visiting DC, and I'm standing in front of the White House. Decided to go for a walk at night, and I'm standing there. I look to the left, look at the White House, look to the left, White House, and I go, this explains America right here. There's only one department that shares a lawn with the White House. You can literally walk out of that building, walk right into the East Wing. That's the Department of Treasury. At the end of the day, it's about money in America. How important is it to us to understand Freedman's Bank and the evolution of Black folks in this country, realizing that America, the foundation of America is money. It is about money. It's about capitalism. Anybody can jump in.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was obvious that people who were in slavery were not ignorant. I think Du Bois says that there were 27 Black millionaires in Louisiana at the time of the emancipation. There were tradesmen who were craftsmen who had done all kinds of things, but they understood that in addition to the right to vote, to be free, you had to have access to capital. And so a group of preachers meeting with Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass insisted that there be some vehicle to provide access to the economy for the former slaves. And it was out of that discussion that we tend to make a joke about 40 acres and a mule, but they were very serious. If you had land and a means of producing food out of it, you could survive. If you didn't, you were still a slave. Now, they got the Freedmen's Bank, but it didn't last long, because shortly after, and John, you probably need to say something about that. Shortly after Lincoln died, it was just a matter of days before they pulled the rug out from under the Freedmen's Bank. And it was part of the whole end of Reconstruction. It took them a little longer, but the Blacks who had been, well, I was in Congress in 1973. The last member of Congress from Georgia was put out in 1871. I was elected in 1972. So for 100 years, we had no political representation, but they also took the economic representation by undercutting the Freedmen's Bank.
John?
It's re-enslavement.
Roland, I'm going to just build on what Ambassador Young just said and your question, which no one, by the way, in all of my years of doing this, has ever made the observation that you just made. I make an observation that the old Executive Office building, which was the Department of War, and the White House and U.S. Treasury are interconnected, and there are tunnels underneath that lead because Lincoln needed to go over to the Department of War and make decisions during the Civil War, go back to the White House, codify that, go to Treasury to pay for it, come back to the White House to then formalize what he just paid for, go back to the Department of War and say, go. And that was a constant conversation. So it's proximity to power, but no one, particularly no one I would call as a respected Black member of the sort of media elite or the civil rights community has ever made the observation that you made, which I thought was was brilliant, that it's a shared lawn. That's deep. A shared lawn with money and political power. That's a book from somebody. That's a book. But the story I think is deeper than that because I want to thank Janae Roscoe, my government relations chief, for forcing me to go on a museum tour during my meetings one year when I was here. And when I went to the Ford Theater, I got blown away when I found out that Lincoln had signed the legislation for the Freedmen's Bank. So now I get curious. And I find I've been passing by history every day. So you're sitting in front of the White House, Treasury's here, you got PNC Bank here. Mm-hmm. Here is Treasury Annex. That was the Freedmen's Bank. So the president could have put this any place he wanted. To your point about a shared lawn, could have put it in Virginia. There's plenty of government offices in Virginia. Could have put it in Maryland. Could have put it on the outskirts of D.C. Plenty of important places, important institutions on the outskirts of D.C. Put it where you went up to the residence, looked out the window, you could see if the candles were burning back then, whether people were working. And it gets deeper than that. 2 months before the Freedmen's Bank, March 3rd, 1865, to Ambassador Young's point, in Augusta, Georgia, Secretary of War Stanton meets with 20 ministers and says, what do you want after the war? They didn't say, I want welfare. They didn't say, I want entitlements. They didn't say, I want a handout, even an apology. They didn't say, I want reparations. They said, we want land. We want to do for ourselves. They got 400,000 acres rolling from North Carolina, along the coast, 30 miles in, all the way to the tip of Florida. 400,000 acres assigned to them. Within 30 days, the numbers are mind-boggling. 30 to 40,000 blacks, former slaves, occupied the land. Planting in land, in an agricultural age, in the most unattractive land possible, because whatever you put in the ground is going to be in Jamaica tomorrow. It's the beach. But that didn't matter. They took what they had. And the generals were so impressed with them, the next month they said, let's reward them with a mule. That wasn't a slight, it wasn't fanciful. That was like giving somebody a tractor today.
Right.
It was an investment. My God, they're so industrious. It's a good investment. Let's encourage them some more. That took 45 days. But it was Field Action 15, very important. It was not a legislative act because it was done in the field. They were waiting for Congress. They would bring it back to Lincoln, let him get used to it, let him sign this. Well, 2 months later, Lincoln signs the Freedmen's Bureau Act, creates the Freedmen's Bank. So now you're talking about radical public policy. Wait a minute, hold on. Lincoln's greenlit 400,000 acres for former slaves, then created a bank to finance the land and provide access to capital and teach them the language of money in the free enterprise system. No wonder he was killed 5 weeks later. He was killed literally 5 weeks after he signed that legislation. And the guy who took over was just an embarrassment. The president took over. He tried to reverse everything Lincoln did. But he couldn't reverse the Freedmen's Bank. He could reverse Field Action. He canceled Field Action 15. It was not legislatively enacted. That's where, by the way, the Klan came from and all these Rough Riders running people off their land. It was all economics, to your point. It wasn't personal. Slavery was about business. It was how do you build a country for free? This was about running you, because when it went dark, it went on street lights, running you off your land so they can claim economic interest. So Frederick Douglass comes in, and the gamers come in and speculates the bank, games the bank, changes the bank's charter, and over 10 years ruins the bank. Frederick Douglass comes in with a stellar reputation, not a spot, not a blemish. Not only did he try to save the bank, Roland, he put up what was then $10,000 of his own money, which the Treasury Department tells me today is, hold on, $20 million. He put up $20 million of his own money for a bank he knew had every chance of failing. That's how much he believed in us and how important he thought this bank was. The bank had, in today's dollars, between 150 and 117 billion in assets. The same bank with the same valuation will be 115 billion. It'll be one of the top 100 banks in America today. Imagine how that would change everything for us. Everything. So when you say how important this is, I felt like Janae Roscoe helped me trip on the Magna Carta. I mean, to me, underneath all our problems is poverty.
Bernice, in the I Have a Dream speech, first of all, which was at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, we leave that part off, sound like black folks just went for a walk that day. Your father only mentioned equality one time. He repeatedly said freedom. If folks go beyond the same sound bites we hear every single year, I have a dream in the mountaintop. And by the way, listen to the whole 47-minute mountaintop speech. You realize he talked about boycotts in that particular speech. He always talked about freedom. And he always talked about inalienable rights, birthright, meaning we want the same thing white folks get the moment they're born. And he was dealing with economics because he came to a conclusion that you could go to a park, you could go to a hotel, but if you did not have economic freedom, then you did not have freedom in America. Pick it up from there. That's called a setup for you.
And
You're supposed to run with it.
I got that. You're exactly right. In fact, I think, and I'm just going to go out on a limb on this because he always likes to, spank me and correct me a little bit. But I think my father strategically understood that they had to deal with segregation in the South first, because what good was it to quote unquote integrate the money and that money was going to circulate in a small community? And so we had to gain access through civil rights legislation and voting rights legislation. So in the back of his mind, or in the front of his mind, perhaps, he was already looking at addressing the economic issues in America. So in '66, that's when he began to delve into all of this. And just like you said, 5 weeks after Lincoln signed this, assassinated in April. 3 months, 4 months after my father announced the Poor People's Campaign.
2 weeks before the first march.
2 weeks before.
First march in Washington.
Right. He was assassinated in April. These ironies, I don't think it's an irony, but a coincidence, exist. And the reality is, when you start really delving into the issue of wealth and money, and particularly when you start talking about bringing everybody along, it becomes very threatening, and it shouldn't be. And the beauty, I think, of what is happening through Operation Hope is it's lessening that threat, in my personal opinion, because you're coming at it in a whole different way by saying, let's look at this as helping a free market enterprise. You understand what I'm saying? And so, yes, that was a heavy emphasis for my father's work, and a lot of people forget that. And I mean, I say he had 3 freedoms he spoke about. In fact, in I Have a Dream speech, the freedom to participate in government, the freedom to prosper in life, and the freedom to peacefully coexist. Those are the 3 freedoms I think he addressed in I Have a Dream.
Bear,
let me
go ahead, Amber.
correct it just a minute.
I told you. Didn't I forewarn you?
No, because we could not talk about economics in 1955 because the House Un-American Activities Committee was calling anybody that mentioned economics a communist. And they were putting white folk in jail and taking them out of jobs. And the genius of your father was that he did talk about economics, but he always talked about it in biblical terms. And he quoted the Bible, say, and he talked about a slavery of Egypt and wandering in the wilderness of segregation and coming into the promised land of creative integration. That's an economic theory. But he couldn't use the economic language because at that time, it was really, you think it's right wing now. Just to think in economic terms. And Rosa Parks never talked about integrating the buses. She just talked about human dignity, being treated fairly. And it wasn't that she didn't want those things, but we deliberately pretended to be as conservative as we could be. And because it was the only way to stay alive. I hate to remind you of this, but it wasn't until he started talking about money.
That's right.
Oh yeah, that's what.
When he started talking about Poor People's Campaign, and when he pulled together 23 different racial and minority groups and age groups, everything from aid to dependent children to the welfare rights movement to the AARP, which didn't quite exist then, but everything from everybody that was poor, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, were brought together in Atlanta. I think it was the 23rd of January, right after his birthday. And he only made it to April. Once he started talking about economic justice. And I think we tried our best to stop him, to slow him down. But he understood that his days were numbered and that he did not want to be, he said, you're going to die. Everybody's going to die. You don't have any choice about that. You don't have any choice about when you die or how you die. The only choice you have in life is what you die for. And he was determined to die for the poor. Even so much that when he didn't even tell us, when we were in Memphis, we were talking with it was Harry Belafonte, Dick Hatcher, John Conyers, and myself talking about how do we take the energy of the movement into politics. And then we said, you can go on to bed and get some sleep. You don't have to be in Washington till 6 o'clock tomorrow night. We can catch a 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock plane. You can get you some sleep. And as he walked to his room, he said, you all go on to Washington. I'm going to catch the 6 o'clock plane to Memphis. And I said, what for? He said, don't worry, I'll meet you all in Washington. But it was almost deliberate on his part that when he felt his days were numbered, he wanted to be with the poorest of the poor and chose to go to be with garbage workers to give his life.
Barry, I want to go to you, but I want to deal with your previous job. That is dealing with housing. And the Brandeis University study shows today, average white household, $100,000 in savings, black household, $5,000. Most Americans are able to build up their wealth through housing. So if you look at the housing patterns in America from day one, at the end of the day, that's how Americans are able to create their wealth. Having African Americans pushed into segregated areas, then having to purchase homes at a higher amount than they actually were worth. Then you, of course, you had the whole, the various laws, the covenants. Whites were able to own homes in other places. Property values go up, sell it for a profit, take that money, invest that money in businesses or in kids' education or in the savings. And so we come present day, we can't ignore the reality of how the racial dynamics in housing have played a critical role in there being an economic inequality, income inequality between whites and blacks in America. And so recognizing that in the last 6 years, we've lost 53% of black wealth to the home foreclosure crisis. It would take 2 generations to recoup just that money. And so if we're talking about a Freedman's Bank that dealt with investment, that dealt with focusing on the economic condition of African Americans, how then do we present day deal with housing policies and finance policies that are contributing to the exact same income inequality today moving forward?
So really what you're getting at has to do with how we can incent financial institutions that we as federal regulators look at to provide financial access that allows people to purchase homes, to build wealth. And it has been difficult since the financial crisis. Credit has tightened, although I think it's easing. The administration is looking to the Federal Housing Administration loan guarantee programs in terms of relaxing some of the policies there in order to make it easier for folks to purchase homes, relaxing a little bit of the requirements related to the mortgage insurance and so forth. But as we, as bank regulators, evaluate banks in terms of how they're serving all of the markets, including low-income individuals, through our evaluations under the Community Reinvestment Act. And the Community Reinvestment Act is a law that was passed by Congress in 1977 in order to ensure that all Americans had access to financial services in the communities where the banks were chartered. And we evaluate banks every 3 years to see how well they're doing in serving those markets. And then we make these examinations public, and they're very detailed. And so I think it's a matter of both the incentives from the regulators to provide the necessary oversight to ensure, both from a fair lending standpoint, the banks are following the fair lending laws, and incentivizing them through special provisions under the Community Reinvestment Act to entice them to make loans in the inner cities to low-income individuals on more flexible financing terms. And we have products such as the FHA program in order to allow them to serve those markets more effectively.
I'm going to go with Donald the next question, but I did have to ask you this. In Ron Suskin's book, Confidence Man, he talked about how there was a moment in 2009 when the banks said, this administration can do anything to us. We have no choice but to follow them because they will determine our fate. Did we fail in not mandating that they refinance loans as opposed to offer it as a voluntary option? Did that contribute to present day by not mandating it, when if it wasn't for federal money, taxpayer money, those banks could not have survived? Was that a mistake?
Well, I'm not familiar with the specific incident that you're talking about in his book, but I will say that over the course of the financial crisis, through the HAMP program, the Home Affordable Mortgage Program that the Treasury Department administered, there were millions of people who were able to take advantage of either refinances under the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac programs, as well as through using the money from TARP through
the HAMP program?
Yes.
Because the Inspector General said that about 700,000 folks were impacted. In Neil Borowski's book, he said some 4 million were supposed to be impacted by that.
Right, but when you look at the HARP program, which was administered by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, that provided streamlined refinances to people through the financial crisis, as well as people that were assisted through the HAMP monies, as well as through voluntary loan modifications that were done by the financial institutions. You know, a very significant number of people were able to take advantage of those programs and try to work out a situation. There were admittedly a lot of people who lost their homes, some of whom may have been able to save them, but for mistakes in terms of the way the policies were administered. But a very large number of people were able to use the variety of programs throughout the financial crisis.
I mentioned
What he's really saying is I'm a federal regulator, and there may be members of Congress in the audience who legislate what I do. I'm not going to sit here and dig myself a hole. So while I may have personal sentiments that may actually affirm what you're saying, I'm not saying a word up here. That's what he's really saying. But good try. By the way, it was the OCC that the only reason that the 72,000 black former slaves that lost their money in the Freedman's Bank, only reason they got half their money back was because of the OCC. I mean, it really, the comptroller of the currency was the bank that actually unwound it, and 4 comptrollers, one of which won a Nobel Peace Prize, by the way, 4 comptrollers worked with that bank to try to get money back to former slaves. They actually got half the money back to the depositors, but this is before FDIC insurance, all that kind of stuff. But they could have just let it fall away.
Ambassador, then I got a question for Donald.
Talk about what could have been. If instead of bailing out the banks at the top, they had given every mortgage holder a year's free mortgage, suspended their mortgage for a year, they would have shared in the bailout. There were several women who had that proposal available for the president, and they were blocked from seeing the president. The president never got that option on his desk. And it was Larry Summers, Rahm Emanuel.
Call a roll call.
And the people who protected the president from the realities of poor people. And it's not poor people, it's the middle class homes that if given a year to get on their feet,
That's true.
the banks would have still made the money, but the middle class would not have suffered.
In fact, Barney Frank told me, he said his biggest regret was not doing more to help the very folks you're talking about, where we could have. Don, I want to go to you in the reason.
But that was Elizabeth Warren and Sheila Baird and who was there were three women,
Sheila, the FDIC.
three women who had proposals that would have bailed the economy out from the bottom up.
Yep.
See, and the White House bailed it from the top down. Now they saved the economy for the rich.
Other was Christine Romer. And plus, you also had a sister who was on the part of the White House Council of Economic Advisors, who we never ever heard from. But
who was she?
Cecilia Rouse. Only reason she got on TV because it was my show. And I said, seriously. And I said, because I want somebody black. Don't send anybody else. Don, I want to go to you. The reason I know it's like I'm jumping around,
but this isn't a black issue.
No. Here's my whole point. My whole point is you got a sister who is an amazing from Princeton, and when we were talking about the issue of economic policies, there was never anyone other than President Obama who was African American speaking on it, and she was sitting right there as one of the 3 appointed members of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. And I said to the White House, "Can she please talk sometimes?" And so that's my whole point is I felt America, especially our audience, need to see that sister and her brilliance on economic policy, but for some reason she was always hidden. But Don, I got to ask you this question. And so the reason I sort of went there with housing and talked about Dr. King and the whole and issue of freedom as well, is because when we look at black-owned businesses, there are 1.9 million black-owned businesses in America. Black women own 1.1 million of those. Of the 1.9 million, 1.8 million only have one employee. There are 1.9 million unemployed black folks in America. So we're talking about being able to get rid of black unemployment. It also comes down to building capacity. Building capacity means able to get loans. No home, no loan, no business. And so from your perspective, how do we put the Freedman's Bank within context of present day to understand moving forward economically, especially with sisters being such a chief engine driver, if you will, in Black America when it comes to economics?
Well, thank you, Roland. First of all, Essence Magazine has always been about empowering Black women. And so when women pick up that magazine and they read about hair and makeup tips, they are also going to read about how to empower themselves with financial literacy. Last month, I worked on a story about African-American women and retirement. And one of the interesting things that came up when I was doing my research and my reporting was that there have been numerous studies and some data done, in particular, Wells Fargo has done some studies about how African-Americans perceive themselves in the context of what they envision their lives to be in retirement and what the realities may be. And so in doing those studies and that research, what we found was that so many people, it was more than 50%, it may have even been as high as 70% of African Americans said that in retirement, they envisioned a life of leisure. They envisioned travel. They envisioned not having to work a part-time job. But then when you ask that same audience what their goals were, had they sat down with a financial counselor, had they done any particular planning in regards to their retirement, the answers were significantly different. And so I think one of the things that we have to talk about, both with regards to businesses, African-American owned businesses, African-American women who own businesses, are what are our goals as a nation? What are our goals as a community? It's wonderful to own a business, but if you've got one employee, how can you build capacity so that then you can have 2 employees and 3 employees and build your community as a result of what you're doing? One of the things that I had an interesting conversation with some friends recently, a young student from an HBCU contacted me recently. And it's a very emotional story, so I'm going to try not to get myself in tears here. But he contacted me saying that he was a student at an HBCU and he was in arrears in excess of $30,000. The university, in its compassion, had allowed him to continue with this bill unpaid. But unfortunately, a few days ago, this young person did have to leave his dorm and is not in school this semester. And I started talking to my friends around the country, men and women, and I'm a graduate of an HBCU, Hampton University, proud graduate, and also I'm a graduate of Columbia University. And so I started thinking and talking with my friends about, what is happening in our community that a student who desperately wants to go to school cannot continue in college. We have enough wealth in the African American community that just should not be happening. And so I'm trying to do more stories and do more reporting about where we see ourselves and where we are and what that vision should be in terms of us building and how we can coalesce and galvanize our community in more tangible and concrete ways in order to achieve it. It is absolutely wonderful to think that you are going to retire and sail the Riviera, but what is your plan?
John, we talk. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know. And let me confess, when John talks about financial literacy, you all think about children.
Mm-hmm.
I'd been a congressman, ambassador, and was about to become the mayor. And a lady in my church says,
You were the mayor. You almost can't govern.
Yeah, no, I was running. This was between
Oh.
then, and
That's it.
while I was running for mayor.
You were the mayor.
Yeah, but
Back then, gotcha.
But this young lady came up to me in church and said, "Do you have a financial advisor?" I said, "No." I said, I know. What is that? And she said, "I'd like to be your financial advisor." And she was really cute.
I knew that was coming.
No, but I said to my wife, "We're in church." See? And I
She
said,
was still cute in church.
"Yeah, she was still." And I said, "But baby, my wife." I said, "This young lady wants to be our financial advisor." And she says, "Can you come by?" My wife understood we were in bad shape. She sat down with my wife, never got to be, but by the time she looked through all of the tuitions we had paid to get our children through school, all of the times we had refinanced our house, all of the money we had borrowed, and she put it together and gave me and refinanced my house note. And it saved me $973 a month.
Wow.
Now, I'm going to say it because it's true, whether you like it or not. I'm one of the most important Negro leaders in the world, and I'm banking like an ignorant nigger. That's what the problem is. I mean, no need in dressing it up.
Oh,
Say
my God.
that
C-SPAN has never had this before.
no, I mean, but that is a critical problem, and it's the weakness of HBCUs. They don't teach us about money. So we didn't have a business school at Atlanta University till the 70s.
Well, it's not just a weakness of banks, HBCUs. It's a weakness at HBCUs. They're making their money on tuition and federal offsets. They don't have an endowment. They don't have a backup plan. There's no patent transfer offices.
But here's the other. But first of all, you're absolutely correct. But also part of
That was
that.
not a criticism of HBCUs.
No.
by the way.
I understand. No, trust
I
me.
love HBCUs.
No, I understand. But part of that also stems from the fact that when you have folks who are going through amassing significant amounts of debt. You don't have parents who are debt free, able to make sure they don't go to school debt free. Then be in a situation, say, as parents, we're going to actually also provide you your down payment on your first home. And so therefore, when you make your first job, making 35, 40,000, you can actually take that and actually live on and actually saving and invest. So now you're positioned for the future. And when you're also frozen out of high 6-figure jobs, then that also exacerbates this whole issue when it comes to income inequality.
You're too smart to let you get away with that. I'm not going to let you get. And maybe that was one of your famous setups.
No, because I'm gonna back it up, but going right ahead.
Yeah, because you have articulated in a way during this session that lets me understand you understand. So let me now come at you as hard as I know you have the capacity.
Go right ahead.
You can handle it. You can handle it. That was you just sort of let us off, and I'm not going to do that.
No, I didn't let us off.
There's two ways to make money: make more or spend less.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day,
you're right.
You're going to Starbucks 3 times a week. That's $6,000 a year. If you're making $36,000 a year, you just lifted up a window and threw out 20% of your income, and then you wonder why you broke. I know why you broke. You hang around 9 broke people, you'll be the 10th. That's why you broke. So wealth is a culture like poverty is a culture. Now, another thing, Sir James Buchanan, my assistant, is here. People think I'm a financial literacy. No, this guy, he said, John, you need to have a home warranty. I don't need no home warranty. The appliance goes out. The home warranty costs me nothing. I mean, right. Relatively speaking, appliance goes out. That's $800. Another goes out. Then somebody comes to come and put it in for you. That happens a couple times a year. You're devastated. This little warranty pays for everything. You can get it at Sears. Sir James told me that. My wife said we need to get a little warranty for a medical plan for our dog. I said he's be fine. All he does is run around and run in the walls. The dog runs in the walls for his business. That's what he does. Do you know the day after she said we should get the medical plan, the day after he had to go to the hospital, $2,500. So
he'd have been one dead dog.
I'm with him.
Animal lovers gonna get you.
We love dogs.
love them too much.
We love, yes. So yes, yes, we have to make more money. But in the Hope Inside locations, person comes in looking for a loan. My last example, they want a $5,000 loan. We got to start having a real talk with our people. Stop all that. If you come into a bank looking for a $5,000 loan, you got $30,000 worth of problems, and your credit is toe up from the flow up. You're not getting a loan. I mean, I'll say it. So the bank has to take your application by law. They're going to decline you. Now you're going to hate the bank. What the bank can do now is say, look, can you go across the hall to Hope Inside? When they come over to us, we say, how much do you make? I make $34,000 a year. You have 2 children a year. If you ever heard of the EITC, what's that? You're qualified. If you've never heard of Earned Income Tax Credit and you make less than $50,000 a year, you're qualified. If you make $32,000 a year, you have 2 children, the government owes you $4,000 a year. Roland, here's the magic. If you've never filed, it's retroactive for 3 years. If you make $32,000 a year, $12,000 is more money than you've ever seen at one time in your working life. It's not a loan, it's yours. You've earned it. But we don't know. We spend $10 billion a year.
Of course, we did on TV1, but go right ahead. But here's the point that I'm making, and why all these
something about her daddy.
Bernice
said something about her daddy the other night. When you change an individual, what's that? That quote you.
A revolution.
Yeah.
Say it again.
A movement that moves people is a revolt, but a social movement that transforms people and institutions is a revolution.
Great point.
And that's what we're in the process, and we always do it. We blaming ourselves as the victims. But it's structured for us to be like that.
No, and that's the
Yeah.
point I was making when I was talking about the jobs. When you look at historically, African Americans have been able to advance financially in public sector jobs because we're being shut out from the private sector. When all of a sudden you have folks who get in power who talk about small government, what's the first thing that gets cut? Government jobs. So as a result, you begin to lose those jobs. I can go to the housing crisis in Detroit. You had a significant number of African Americans who were principals and who were in education and other public sector jobs. When those jobs got cut, home foreclosures went up because the public sector jobs. So when you're frozen out of private sector because they don't have the same, frankly, regular oversight, if you will, as the public sector, then you sort of have that income inequality. And so my point is, when we talk about, even from an education standpoint, the education of African-American college graduates have a double unemployment rate than that of white college graduates. So we are told, go get an education. We do. We increase our debt because of student loans, yet unemployment is still double. And so my point is, if I cannot qualify and get those high 5-figure, 6-figure jobs, and I'm pretty much left at 45, 50, 55, then I'm not in a position to be able to fully save, invest for my kids' And what makes matters worse, when you begin to make $50,000 as a Black person, you begin to support other family members as well, because that cycle continues. And so all I'm saying is, even if you're not buying a Starbucks, you're still having to pay for somebody's diapers or somebody's child care. And that prevents a lot of us from being able to create wealth when we do have a nice job. So, Ambassador John.
Yeah.
That was my response to your statement.
We inherited all of these problems in Atlanta and took them on. And it was Maynard Jackson's leadership that decided that we could not make it on government money. The difference between Atlanta and Chicago, and Detroit, is Detroit depended on government. Right. They could go to Lansing, they could go to Washington, and they could get money, and they got powerful with government money. We couldn't go to the Golden Dome in Atlanta. They didn't help us. And we got to the place where we couldn't go to Washington. So we started going to Wall Street. Now, the end result of Atlanta building its airport on Wall Street was starting out, we have spent $10 billion on the airport since 1981. And it has not cost the citizens of Atlanta one penny. So we got tax-exempt municipal bonds, and they pay for themselves. This year, the airport earned in 2014, it earned $32 billion and generated 400,000 jobs. And at least half of the businesses and half of the jobs are people that look like us.
So John, to that point, and I've often used Mayor Maynard Jackson as the model for politicians. How do you propose us moving, and anyone can jump in with this question, propose us getting present-day elected officials to think about Maynard Jackson within that way, in terms of how you use political power and economic power to be able to affect the economic condition of your community?
I think that we are putting too much, I say this respectfully now, too much credit and too much pressure on politicians. The people who changed the world weren't politicians. They impacted politicians. Dr. King and Andrew Young and others impacted politicians who then made changes, but they weren't sitting. President Johnson wasn't sitting around saying, getting in the morning, let me find another civil rights legislation to pass. After he did the first one, he was done, actually, until additional Selma pressure was put on him. When Ambassador Young was talking to Nelson Mandela, he had just become elected. And he said, what are you going to do for poor people? Mandela said, what are you going to make me do? And Ambassador Young said, what do you mean? He said, well, look, I have to represent.
True story? Okay.
He said,
somebody watching going, will he confirm it? All right.
I got to represent everybody. I got to represent everybody today. I got to represent everybody today, not just poor people, Black people. I have to represent everybody, make a case for me to. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. Let me tell you what I was trying to say earlier, and I'll tie it back to the Freedman's Bank. What breaks my heart about the Freedman's Bank is not the access to the capital. It's not the 40 acres and a mule. It's not anything other than this.
The literacy piece.
We never got the memo. All this about, in my opinion, is imagine working at TV1 or wherever. Imagine working at wherever you work at. And for 3 months, you got your direct deposit, you got your office, you have your nice car, you get everything. No one's denying you, but they cut off your email. They cut off your inter-office mail. No one meets with you. No one talks to you. You can't meet with your leadership. For 3 months, you have been locked out of information, but yet the TV1 comes in or whoever, C-SPAN, okay, now tell me about the strategic direction of your organization. If you want to keep your job, my guess is you keep your mouth shut because you're locked out. Imagine being locked out for 150 years. 150 years, Roland, we never got the memo. There's a memo on free enterprise and capitalism. There's a memo on how the system works. And Ambassador Young is right. There were the systems set up against us. Slavery was about money. Jim Crow was about money. The Civil War was about money. You said it earlier. It's all, at the end of the day, about money. Underneath politics, I hate to say it, is money all too often. So, but we didn't miss that. We were denied the memo. What I want to do is to deliver the memo.
And let me follow up on that, because that really was what a lot of our conversation was earlier today about the Hope Centers and the Hope Inside. It's having the access to a financial counselor to be able to understand how you can access a small business administration loan, an FHA insured mortgage, financial coaching for.
Barry, can I hold just one
Yeah, sure.
second? Bernice has to leave. Can you give just final comment?
Woo!
You wasn't gonna sneak out and hold your hand up. That wasn't gonna work.
I'm just gonna say ditto to everything that has been said. I don't know if I have a real final comment.
We'll make a pitch for the King Center.
Whoa.
I'm trying to help you. Raise some money, something.
I'm not a fundraiser, but I would love to have money for the King Center to continue.
What's the
my
website?
father's Nonviolence 365 work.
What's the website?
Kingcenter.org is
Okay.
the website.
All right.
Yes, sir.
No, I was saying, you said it today that your daddy's last book was Where Do We Go From Here?
Chaos or Community?
Chaos or Community.
Yeah.
And that's not racial. Chaos, I mean, if we don't have community, we're going to have chaos.
Right. And right now we have a lot of chaos.
Let me ask you.
And this will help us get to community.
On your way out, I mean, to sort of pivoting on what Ambassador Young said, what would you say, and you're one who can bridge from really 2 generations of a conversation of civil rights and civil rights. If I said we can celebrate Dr. King, we salute Selma, I Have a Dream, respect all the anniversaries, all that stuff, but we need to upgrade our software as a people. We can't just keep looking back 55 years and singing I Have a Dream. We've got to come up with a plan and a strategy that's relevant to today. You're somebody who's got one foot in both worlds. Is that a legitimate observation or not? Or how would you change it?
Legitimate in terms of upgrading
Our software.
No, I think that's very legitimate. Daddy even spoke about that. You have to have a new mental outlook in terms of what the situation demands. And the situation today demands that we have a different approach to the way we do things. But we've got to find a way to connect the generations, though, in the process of it.
Yeah.
Because I think there's value to the history and the strategies of the past and the movement. And there's strength, obviously, and foresight way down the road for a new generation. And so having intergenerational discussions and dialogues, I think, are very important. What I appreciate, at least today, is the frankness of this conversation. I think that's very important because you're right. We don't have honest discussions, and we have to start doing that and stop making the excuses, because we'll be doing that forever. Yeah. And we need each other. One of the things she was saying in terms of the Black-owned businesses, one employee, we've got to stop pushing into this whole notion of having my own, not recognizing my interconnectedness with other people. We can create LLCs and still be a legitimate business owner and have others working alongside of us. And that way we can employ more individuals.
Yes.
But if we're still caught on, I got to have mine, we're not going to get there. So when Daddy was working on integration. We talk about integration messed us up. Integration didn't necessarily mess us up. Daddy says specifically, we're not trying to integrate into a value system. We lost critical and important values in our community. And we got to go back and reclaim those values if we're going to build our community. So we got caught up in individualism, you know, trying to get, those corporate jobs, and we were tunnel vision. Yeah. And we don't understand, if nothing else, we have a responsibility. Everybody has a responsibility to each other, regardless of your race, your ethnicity. We have a responsibility to each other, but you always have a responsibility, first and foremost, to your own family. So when you look at it that way, we as African Americans have to understand our responsibility to each other. And we got to continue to lift our other brothers and sisters as we're climbing. You know, the middle class, as we advance, we can't not go back into these communities in some form or fashion. We cannot not bring others along with us as we are climbing, because that undermines who we are as a people. So that's it. I'm out. I got to go catch my plane.
While she's going, let me give you one of her father's illustrations of what she just said. You hear the serious Martin Luther King, but he said, look, some of you all think that when you stop drinking gin in a brown bag on the corner and wine on the next corner, and you mix it in one cup and call it a martini, you think you integrated. That's not what we're fighting for.
Bernice, thanks a lot. And y'all know anybody who a preacher will not pass up final comments. I don't know why she was critical.
I'll catch the 8 o'clock.
I want to, Barry, I want you to, before I interrupt you, finish your comments, please.
Yeah, so we're talking about the fact that the Hope Centers, other financial, community development financial institutions, some of the small business administration centers, the minority business administration centers are all out there as a resource to help individuals that want to begin to develop a business plan. The entrepreneurs that we heard from at lunch today that are coming through the Hope Centers, learning about how to develop a business plan to borrow through the Small Business Administration. Those are all really excellent programs that are engaging financial institutions that are partnering with these nonprofit organizations like Operation Hope, in hopes that these individuals will become bank customers, that they can then provide financial services to them once they sort of graduate from the counseling groups and the financial assistance and technical assistance groups. So I see some hope. I'm optimistic. I really do think that the Hope Operation Hope model, the Hope Inside model, is an example that other financial institutions can either integrate into their models or work with other organizations, because I do think the partnership between a bank and a nonprofit that's trying to help with economic empowerment is a very strong model, and one that we as bank regulators encourage, and one that banks certainly are incented to do under the Community Reinvestment Act.
I believe in call to actions and, of course, plans of action.
Let me give you one.
That's what I was about to do.
I got 3 things on my bucket list. We've been trying, and John, John and I tried 6 years ago to get a right to bank account law passed. We were not able to get anybody to understand that having a bank account is essential to being in capitalism, having access to capital. We didn't do that. Last year, I found that in India, they developed a system that they realized that their poor people were not getting their money, whether it was food stamps, health benefits. They were ripped off by check cashers and payday lenders. And so India developed a universal ID for poor people. It includes 10 fingerprints, 2 iris scans, a photograph, a barcode, a number, and a signature. And all of the money going to the poor. Oh, and it also includes a no-frills bank account. So all of the money going to the poor of India goes directly to the bank account, and nobody can get it except somebody that can match all those things. And they've set that up for 700 million people in the last 2 years. And it cost them a little over $1 per person.
You're talking about the ID part, right?
The ID part,
Right.
see? And which means, but then I found out, and this is how the Lord works. I found that out on my way to Seattle to speak to a business group at a prayer breakfast. And it suddenly dawned on me that all of the companies that did this for India were located in Seattle. I said, Lord, you talking to me. And I went out there and I said, if you all can do this for India, why don't you do it right here in Washington?
So Secretary Lew, don't lose your spot. Treasury Secretary Lew, I met with him last week. I won't say anything out of sort here, but I think the public part of the conversation he would not mind me sharing was he said he was in India, and in my book, How the Poor Can Save Capitalism, one of the recommendations is a bank account for all at birth, electronic account, right? There's no reason why we can't do it. What he's talking about. He was in India 2 months after the prime minister passed this new mandate, a bank account for all. Roland, he said that they have opened 100 million accounts in 2 months.
No, it's 700
No,
million
that's
in
the
2
ID.
years.
That's the ID piece, I think.
No, but the ID piece and the banking
they're
piece,
connected.
now
Yeah.
all of the government money goes through the banks.
Yeah.
And you can go to the grocery store with your ID. You can go to the doctor with your ID. You got an account, say that nobody can have access to but you. Now, I'm leaving here to go to Seattle in the morning because the governor invited me to come to meet with him. And I'm saying to the governor, look, I don't know what we can do in Washington, but if you all can do this in India, why not do it in Washington? Now, the inventor of all of this is from California. And I said, if you can talk to California and Oregon, and you all do this out on the West Coast, pretty soon we'll even do it in Georgia. But we're not going to embrace an idea until somebody else makes it work.
Absolutely.
See?
Donna.
Yes.
Call to action, plan of action.
Yes, I wanted to talk about what you said earlier about once we've attained a certain educational or social achievement, we tend to then have to take care of our families. I think, first of all, that's a good thing. And I think that the model that we once had, where African-American families and other families of other ethnicities in this country, sometimes they lived in the same neighborhood, sometimes they lived in the same house. And while that model may not work now in terms of, oh, I don't want you in my business or that sort of thing, there was a belief system, I think, that was in place at that time that we should be helping our family. That if my brother or my cousin needs a loan or if they need any assistance, whether it's childcare, that model to me seemed to work for our families at a particular point in time. Now, we may not have to move our families all back in the same home, but I think we do need to return to that model of it is not a burden if someone calls me and needs some assistance. There should be family pools. There should be collective family bank accounts.
You should
so
have
that
party. Remember Rick
yes,
parties?
yes. And and I think about people like
Somebody watch
Osceola.
Good Times.
Osceola McCarthy. Remember the washerwoman that,
Yes.
some years ago, everyone was amazed because she had a washerwoman's salary and then was able to provide scholarships for kids. She had saved. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so, you don't necessarily have to make a lot to save. And I do believe that model of families beginning to collectively build together is one that could be perhaps effective for us at this particular juncture in history, where people are isolating themselves, at the computer and so forth and so on. I think it's time for us to return to our families, and the family being our individual families and our collective community family.
Yes.
And it shouldn't be a matter of, oh, he's, JoJo's calling me needing a loan again. Well, if JoJo needs a loan, and particularly if JoJo needs a loan to go to college
Yeah.
or something productive, what is the problem with that? What is the problem with that? Now, I'm not going to pretend, we all want someone calling in the family begging for money. It can be a problem. But at the same time, where is that sense of community, collectivity, and spirit that used to be endemic in the Black community?
Right.
You were not going to go to church and say that something was going on and someone was not going to pass the hat. And you didn't have to be ashamed to do that. And I think in so many ways, we have achieved so much socially, economically, despite the fact that we may not be where we want to be.
Mm-hmm.
But some of those values, as Bernice King alluded to, slip through the door when we integrate it. And I'd like to see some of them return.
Barry, call to action, plan of action, public policy or personal. Take your pick.
I think I'd come back to the point I made a few minutes ago about the fact that there is a whole established industry of nonprofit organizations, community development financial institutions that are trying to work in low-income communities, to try to work with underserved populations, those who have been excluded from the financial mainstream, those that are not using financial services at banks as much as they could, and to find an Operation Hope-like organization to partner with in their communities. There are hundreds and hundreds of nonprofits that are doing the kind of work that we're talking about: small business technical assistance, homeownership education. There are organizations that offer incentive matching and saving programs that use philanthropy to match savings if an individual goes through a financial education class. They're called individual development accounts. We've seen financial institutions begin to partner, as we've talked about before, with Operation Hope and others. And I guess my call to action would be to encourage more financial institutions to engage in those kinds of partnerships.
John?
Oh, I want to finish with the Freedman Bank starting. So my mission between now and 2020 is to open 1,000 Hope Inside locations inside of bank branches, credit unions, grocery stores, big box retailers, houses of faith, government offices, to do HUD-approved mortgage counseling, consumer credit counseling, small business entrepreneurship counseling and funding, mortgage restructuring. We've already restructured $1 billion worth of mortgages. We opened 100 locations, by the way, Roland, last year alone. So it's not just dreaming. And to what goal? To move credit scores to 700. 4 square block area by 4 square block area. I believe that nothing changes your life more than God or love than moving your credit score 120 points. And if you think about today, the problem that you and I have, when you and I go home, we're going to pass by neighborhoods that you and I care about, whether it's Black and brown urban, whether it's white rural, or outside of a military base, which is all races. Here's what we find: a check casher next to a payday loan lender, next to a rent-to-own store, next to a title lender, next to a liquor store. And it's not racism, it's target marketing. And they're targeting a 500 credit score customer. And all we do at Operation Hope is rob you of your customer, rob them of their customer by moving credit scores 120 points. So half of the jobs today require a credit check. Half of jobs require a credit check. 92% of all jobs are private sector jobs. 8% of jobs are government. So people can't even get a job with toe-up credit. So if you have moved a neighborhood from a 550 credit score to a 670 credit score, you've also created customers for banks. Now let me bring this home. We're putting a Hope Inside in Ferguson, Missouri next month. And I want to thank Regions Bank for doing that. Is Joseph Otting still here, by the way? You're still here? CEO of One West Bank. I wish Mark Morrell of North National Urban League was here earlier. So please let him know I gave him a shout out, because he would have something substantive to say about this. But we have found that when we do this, Roland, where we migrate these credit scores, we're creating self-esteem, creating personal confidence, changing behavior, changing culture, and creating sustainable customers for financial institutions and others. And I think that has a knock-on effect that could change America and at the same time create a tax base and voters. Ferguson what is the most racially divided, unbanked city in America? Ferguson, Missouri. 3% white unbanked, 27% black unbanked. The most racially divided, unbanked city in America with a 6% voter turnout. So underneath all these social issues is poverty, and we're going to attack that at its root.
One of the things that,
Yeah,
Ambassador, go ahead.
I got a different action plan for Ferguson.
Go right
Okay,
ahead.
go ahead.
I'm gonna bring them back to Mississippi. Everybody in Ferguson came from North Mississippi, moved north to Memphis,
Right.
you know. But the best place in America to live right now is in small towns in the South.
Yep.
If you want to retire, since air conditioning and integration, you can't beat the South. And all we need, I mean, George Washington Carver changed the South with a new crop, peanuts. We got some new crops that we're trying to put on the land of some of these. It's the people who helped us in the march from Selma to Montgomery. It was the landowners. Now their children went to Ferguson, but these still old folks are still down there and they still got land. They just don't have the energy or the crops to do it.
Mhm.
We've got a crop that we can introduce for free across the South, and the Department of Agriculture has already will agree to help the farmers have microloans to revive their farms. We're getting veterans across the South who are coming back home to own the trucking companies to do the harvesting and the and tillage. And there's no tillage because it's a water crop. It's something called duckweed, and you put it on top of any pond, and you can grow catfish under it, and it has a growth hormone, and catfish grow, full growth in 6 weeks. You got to farm that duckweed. When you farm it and reprocess it, it becomes ethanol, a protein, or a biomass energy source. It's something I found in Africa about 30 years ago, and I'd seen it in the South, and I said, God put this on earth for something, and we just haven't found out what it was. And then I found an old moonshine Cajun and a black Marine Corps veteran down in Gaydon, Louisiana, who have figured out how to process this and turn it into protein for $100 a month. I mean, $100 a ton, when protein on the world market is selling for $2,000 up. That's a big profit margin. Farmer won't get it all. We've got to get another group of growers, the successful farmers who survived after Selma are doing fairly well, but they're going to own the processing plants that will process this and market it. And the most needed product in the world. India has put $5 billion out to increase the protein availability in their children's diets. Nigeria, South Africa, Mexico. I mean, the whole world needs something that we can grow in the South for nothing.
Y'all been channeling up Brooks Brothers. Now you need to get some overalls.
No, you don't know.
I got you.
No, this is the thing about this is you can harvest it in a Brook Brothers suit. Really. I mean, we're not talking about plowing a mule. We're talking about an automated system that will take this to the bank, and you can wear your shirt and tie.
Anybody who out there said you were tired today or this week or tired last week, he's 82 years young, talking about creating a whole new industry for people. Come on.
John, a couple of things. A couple of things. First, when you talked about credit scores, you talk about action plan, what's next. One of them, for me, absolutely doing away with these state laws, allowing folks to factor in these credit scores and jobs. The first job offer I had, the Birmingham News, all the editors wanted to hire me. But in Alabama, that was in 1991, they had a state law that allowed them to use your credit score to deny you a job, and the HR department did that. And I'll never let the Birmingham News forget that. So I think from a public policy standpoint, that's one of the things that we can do to drive
And you have
that
a congresswoman sitting right
to get rid of to get rid of those state laws.
Yeah.
Get rid of the state laws. The
But
second,
when these folk come back from Ferguson and take over this land with their grandparents, say they changed the politics. We got more black elected officials in Mississippi
right?
than they do in Missouri. And so, I mean, this is just opening up to me. At the prayer breakfast last month, Miss Mississippi sang for the prayer breakfast. Well, I used to get tired of all these long-legged, fine blondes being Miss Mississippi. I looked around and Miss Mississippi was a long-legged, black, beautiful sister. And I said, where are you from? She said, Mississippi State. I said, what are you studying? Biochemistry? And you are Miss Mississippi? You better come back. You missing something.
So all agriculture ideas, you were talking about biochemists. I understand. So I think change that law.
I was talking about her singing the Lord's Prayer.
Right. You talking to me?
But I want to acknowledge, by the way, Councilman Sheila.
I will do it for a second. The second one is here, and we heard it earlier, and having these honest conversations. And what I mean, marching orders, literally things that we can do leaving here to put in the plan. So when my parents retired, they were going to move into a small apartment in Houston. I said, well, I got a house in Dallas, it's paid for. Y'all gonna live there. They're like, rent free? Good idea. 4 hours away, but still. So they go there. And so they always had these ideas. So they wanted a stand-up shower. I don't know. I was like, y'all can do whatever y'all want to. But then I called them back minutes later. And I said, no, I'm going to veto y'all plan. One, it was my house. But I told them, I said, look, when they retired, this was 4 years ago, they were 63. I said, why are you going to create new debt at 63? The shower's fine, the tub is fine. So I'm vetoing the idea. I said, you dealt with debt all these years when we were kids. Why create new debt now? Because you wanted this dream something in a house, and then so you want to do it now. I said it makes no sense. Same thing with my wife and I raising my 6 nieces. So we would go out to dinner after church. So finally I said, man, it's too many damn people. No, seriously. So one day after church, they said, hey, we're going out. And I said, no, we're not. And I said, it's 6 of y'all, right? They said, yeah. I said, how much do you think it costs us every Sunday to feed all y'all at the restaurant? I made them do it. I said, $150, $175, sometimes $200. Right. I said, times 4, times 12. Right. I said, now, who pays for your tutors? Because a couple of them were 3 grade levels behind. That's a whole nother story for my sister. And so I began to walk them through. And so from that point on, I had honest conversations with them. This is how much your iPad costs. That's right. This is how much your laptop costs. Right. And this is why I'm not going to fix it. That's right. And so I was talking to another couple, and they said it never dawned on us to actually have those real conversations with their kids on what. So I forced them now to, we have economic conversations. Sure. How much is that? You want to go out? Well, you got to pick that book, or you want to go over here.
Okay, that's all well and good, but you're making them adjust to a bad situation.
No, I'm talking about which one? I mean, the parents or the kids?
Everybody.
Well, I'm paying for everything. I don't know how bad that is. I'm paying for everything. So they got it good.
I agree with you.
No, you both of you all are wrong.
How so?
Because we are talking about changing the economy of the South.
No.
Wait. Let me tell you. No.
Can you change the economy of the South until you change somebody's mind?
Yes.
Okay, but how do I get?
Yes.
How do I get?
You don't have to change anybody's mind but Bill Gates.
Wait. How do
they have a revolution?
No.
Listen a minute. You'll learn something.
How do I get? I'm gonna push you. I'm gonna push you.
And I'm gonna answer.
I'm gonna push you.
No, I'm gonna answer.
I'm gonna push you.
I got nothing to lose, and I ain't ashamed. Every idea I had was put down by my parents and people like you, who are educated, intelligent Negroes. Say, who thought it was a shame to go to jail? So now I'm telling you that you talked about the land that was given by Lincoln along the east coast of Georgia, almost 100 miles from the Atlantic Ocean. Now, I didn't know whether Lincoln knew that, but we opened up a treaty with the Panama Canal in the Carter administration. And I've been waiting for those big boats to come in from Panama since the Carter administration, because there's no place on the East Coast for them to land. They can't get into Philadelphia. They can't get into Boston. They can't get into Baltimore. They might get into Virginia, but the Navy's got that. See? We're going to build, you see the Atlanta airport? We're going to build that on the east coast of Georgia, 40 miles out to sea. And we're going to have the only place on the east coast where these big ships can land. And they will land there, we will unload them there, we will take them into Savannah, Beaufort, Charleston, Brunswick, and Jacksonville. All areas where heavy black folk live. All of the trade of the rest of the 21st century is going to come in and out of the United States through Georgia. Now, if you've got any land in Georgia, hold on to it. Now, when we started talking about an airport 30 years ago, it was crazy. I'm telling you, within 10 years, this will, maybe 5 years, this will exist 40 miles off the coast of Savannah, and all the land between Savannah and Highway 75, much of which is owned by poor black folk, is going to be the boom area of the United States of America. And if you got any money, if you want to invest any time, if you want to move someplace and retire in luxury, because when we start growing duckweed and bringing in all these shipping and having all of these assembly plants, you think I'm laughing, but we just brought Mercedes to Atlanta, damn it.
So, Ambassador, I got to ask you and I got to ask John.
And Porsche came last month. We're not talking about the past. We're not talking about the problems. We're building the future.
But I got to ask the two of you. That's what I said mindset.
And that's what black folk have always done.
How do
They thought Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin. There was some brother down there playing in the cotton. You know, nobody from Yale could invent a cotton gin.
But I gotta ask the two of you this. No. Hold on one second. Let me just introduce. I'm from Houston.
Come up here.
I'm introduced to Congresswoman. I'm from Houston. I got it. But I have to ask you this because you have to deal with it. How do you reach that person in Ferguson or in Chicago? I'm saying to say, come to Mississippi.
No, you reach him with a magnet. And the magnet is the money on his granddaddy's farm.
We're really having two different conversations.
No, we're not.
Let me finish.
No, you're talking about the problem, and I already got the solution.
Let me finish. This is my play father, by the way, everybody. I learned something from him every time. Look, every good marriage is made of constructive friction. So look, what he's saying is absolutely right. Everything he said makes sense. It's a macro plan. Great. I'm talking about a micro plan. What you talked about with your nieces was a micro plan. It's not in conflict with each other. It's just two different lanes on the highway. Can I answer his question?
No.
Yes, you can.
No, he said I can answer the question.
Yes, you can.
Let me answer the question.
No, because it's like we've already answered this question.
No, you don't even know what I'm going to say.
No, we answered it when Thurgood Marshall, bless his heart, and he was right from 1941 to 1960. But in 1960, we said, okay, going court by court, case by case. You're right. But later for that, we're going to change the South. And it might mean going to jail. You're breaking the law. And my parents pleaded with me not to hook up with the likes of Martin Luther King and Ralph Abernathy. Those were considered trifling, ignorant, young Negroes who would never amount to anything. That's what educated folk like y'all said about us. And you did. And it wasn't until the March on Washington. It's like, you know, that you finally realized that when white folk embraced us, it was all right. But
John.
we were not popular.
John.
So hold it. One, to your question, I would mandate that every family has a family financial meeting once a week and talk honestly about how the light bill gets paid,
Right.
how the phone bill gets paid, so that kids understand, the family understand what the stuff costs. Number two, on the kid's birthday next time, don't get them a trinket, get them one share of stock. You can get a stock certificate. We had a kid called Derek who went through our financial literacy program in Houston, actually. And the kid, after the second time watched the banker in a suit, started sitting differently. The fourth time came to class with a suit on and graduated. I go to the kid, how you feel about this? I'm feeling good. His friends come and say, hey, man, that ain't about nothing. You need to hang out with us. I said, I'm gonna give you three, $70, make a decision about Nike. You have 3 minutes. The other two kids, we don't need 3 minutes. We want Air Jordans. Because everybody's got Air Jordans, right? Derek says, no, I want one share of Nike stock. The friends jump on him and say, man, that ain't nothing. You don't want no stupid stock. You need to get you some Air. Everybody in school has got Air Jordans. I go to defend Derek's honor. He's gone through the class now. He's gone through what we're talking about. He's had a course in dignity. He's hung around Andrew Young. The kid says, no, it's cool. I want them to buy those shoes. Because when they do, they're making me money. Most poverty, I believe, is here and here before it's ever here. Half of poverty is low self-esteem and lack of belief in yourself and lack of confidence and crappy role models in a crappy environment. We've got to reshape the environment. That's why I like what that real talk conversation you were having. That's real love, too. It's love. There's a lot of love in the word no. I love you.
Because that's a lot of damn money.
All right. And the third thing that I would suggest everybody can do for $41.60 a month. They can put $41.60 a month and invest in what I'm now calling a B- business compact internship. We're going to relaunch the apprenticeship generation. And for $500, we'll give a kid if a kid who's got an A+, we'll be fine. The kids with D, C's, and F's, I want them to aspire to get a B-.
Right.
If they pledge to give me a B- and they finish that pledge, we will give them a 6-week business internship, and $500 pays for a business suit, business cards, transportation money, and food money. In 6 weeks, the business will change the kid, and the kid will change the business. Now, one barbershop owner, a barbershop with 4 employees, can afford to pay $500 for a year for one intern. Or a dentist shop, or a big company can get 100 kids. I mean, Focus Brands just told me they're going to do multiple, okay? But for $41.60 a month, everybody in here can make it their personal pledge if they wanted to go do that. That in itself would connect education with aspiration. Will make smart sexy again, because we've been making dumb sexy for a long time. And will change the aspirations of a generation of young people.
So when John said you have micro and macro, you have big business moving future than what you can do right now. At the end of the day, it means literally doing something now. Yeah. If we're talking about celebrating Freedman's Bank, that is about looking at what took place 150 years ago, but how do you move that legacy moving forward? And there are multiple ways in doing it: policy, personal, business, working, all those different ways to do it. And so that's what's critically important. Right now, for some brief comments from the 18th Congressional District in Houston, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee.
What an enormous breath of fresh air for those of us who have just landed from the Hill. Ambassador, you sat in those chairs just saving the security of our nation from going on the brink. And we successfully, Democrats, and I know we're in a bipartisan room, successfully caused the vote for the Department of Homeland Security, and it is now funded. We stood with our president, and we realized that he has authority that others do not see, and we recognize that our work has to get done, and those courts can pursue their challenges, but the responsibility of the executive should be protected. So we thank you for that, and many of you know that we came from a moment of chastising and lecturing on the security of this world, which again, President Obama is handling with adeptness, astuteness, and I think profoundness. And I truly believe that Americans will stand with our president on the negotiations of the Iranian nuclear proliferation cessation and for peace of the world. We are standing with him, and we understand the right to lecture, and we wish the prime minister well as he goes home. John, that was a very polite conversation, and so I did not want to say more, but I thought in breaking news it was important to let your audience know. But let me just say that I really came to honor you and to thank all of the panelists, including Donna Owens and Mr. Wise, who works well with the Office of the Control of the Currency, and my dear friend Ambassador Young, certainly my fellow Houstonian, who you have enjoyed so much, Roland, who is a student in his own right, and Dr. Bernice King, who I had the privilege of seeing as she left. With all seriousness, and my words in the beginning were serious, I think it's important to be aware of current events and what we face in Washington, because we need to be partners in the excellent work that is being spoken about right here. I think the last time I saw John, besides being in Houston with his wonderful mother, was when he invited me to Wall Street. He is standing on the shoulders of Ambassador Young. He is a breakout man, and he has taken us to levels that have far exceeded some of our own thinking. We appreciate that, John. And I believe that this appropriate time, March 3rd, 2015, the 150th commemoration of the Freedmen's Bank, which for me is an emotional time. To note that 70,000 depositors, $57 million. To know that President Lincoln signed it 5 days preceding his death. Texas is a place that associates itself with 1865, for we celebrate the Emancipation Proclamation in something called Juneteenth. For Texans did not like the word that we had been liberated, that we were free, that we were no longer slaves until Captain Granger arrived on Galveston shores and said, "You are free." So you can imagine we feel the symbolism of this day that John has so aptly come and brought these brilliant presenters to Washington. I'd almost say that to be diplomatic, this wasn't a diplomatic day on the Hill, except for our victory on the Department of Homeland Security, but to be diplomatic, I agree with all the discussions that were here. And that, as Ambassador Young has said, we need to wrap ourselves around all of the new vision regarding the civil rights that Dr. King actually spoke about, even as he finished his life in Memphis, speaking about the economic opportunities of sanitation workers. But he was headed to Washington on the Poor People's March, not to keep poor people poor, but to challenge this government of what you were going to do about wealth inequality. Has anybody heard those words? Wealth inequality? Here we are now, some 50 some years later, or 1968 was time of his death, and headed off to the Poor People's March, talking about how we can embrace our young people to be able to get them to understand that their equality rights are tied to their pocketbook rights. John, I am supporting you wholeheartedly. I did something right in Houston revolving around young people being taken as interns in the private sector when we lost the federal monies for jobs. It was an amazing experience about the business person and the young person, high school students, whose lives were changed. In this instance, it was a job in a business, and they were giving the kind of responsibility and association with the business owner to be able to see what it means to own a business. In your instance, you have a similar approach. In the approach of the ambassador, he has a new approach. And that approach is for us to get up and grab hold of our destinies as it relates to our economic engine. In the South, I welcome all who will come back to the South, but at the same time, I know the ambassador stands with me. For those who remain in Ferguson, let's get them straight. Let's get the dignity of dealing with their issues of economic inequality, but also justice issues. Let's get them straight as well. So we work on a bilateral, we work on a two-pronged, two-highway approach to be able to commemorate this 150th anniversary and commemoration. I close on this note. Along with the idea of the economic engine that we speak of, and trade bills will be coming, there's something called the African Growth and Opportunity Act. It is something that I think, John, I hope that you will engage in so that there is a presence for African Americans and minorities in these trade opportunities. There are challenges with them as it relates to jobs here in the United States. But I also want us to embrace this message for our historically Black colleges, which every day face challenges on the Hill for their survival and their existence. And even today, the intelligentsia of our community are being educated in our historically Black colleges, as they are in the Harvards and Yales and Princetons. But I think we should take a special interest in making sure that the scholars that we have in these colleges are exposed to your work. You remember that you worked right after Hurricane Katrina with young people from across the country on the earned income tax credit. My son was one of those who enjoyed having that privilege of working and understanding your work. So I think you have a base of support by the numbers of historically Black colleges and state African American colleges to be able to lift your message, the message of the ambassador and Roland, and the message that the comptroller is speaking of, and Don, in essence, who great communicator, to be able to say that we're changing our whole attitude for the 21st century. We're marching with you as we march this weekend across the Edmund Pettus Bridge for the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, as we re-register people to come back to the polls and self-empower by viewing this vote as something important. Our numbers are dastardly when it comes to us voting in our community. But as we do all of that, that we reinvest in your message, and that is the silver message, and that we have all of the population garnering this effort and marching to victory. I'm looking for a Freedman's Bank. I'm looking for Fred McDouglass, chairman of that bank. I'm looking for billions of dollars being invested in that bank, not only from African Americans, but from those who say this is a great bank to be in. This is a bank that is not going to go broke. This is a bank that has a door open for people from all walks of life. This is a bank that has a staying power. This is the Freedman's Bank of the 21st century. This is America's bank. So again, thank you, John, for telling me about this great day today and inviting me. And so good to see you again, and count me as a soldier on the battlefield for ensuring that we are lifting ourselves up so that we fly high where the eagles fly, that we fly where we belong. God bless all of you. God bless the United States of America.
And folks, and give it up for our panel: Donna Owens, Barry Wise, John Hope Bryant,
God bless you.
Bernice King in absentia, and of course, the introvert, Ambassador Andrew Young.
I really was being good today. No, the thing that I fight about all the time is whenever we start blaming the problems on ourselves and what we have done wrong, that there seeps in a sense of victim. And we have never been victims unless we decide to be victims. See? And I had a granddaddy. My son reminded me, they say, your granddaddy in Franklin, Louisiana, somehow got a way to manage and mount $4 million in a bank account in 1912. And I don't know where he went to school. I don't know what he learned, but people in Louisiana trusted him. And he used the money that slaves and ex-slaves managed to help fight the fight in Louisiana. And we did not take much time on Angela Davis. Not that she wasn't right, but we were trying to always chart the future and don't just, the victims will come along and Ferguson will come along. But if you change the focus on, put the focus on Ferguson when the whole world needs our leadership, see, then we're playing ourselves cheap. And I just think that the things that we have done in shaping America have shaped the world. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but right now, the discussions of monetary manipulation in the trade agreements means that the Americans don't have much power. The Europeans are still running the global economy, and we're getting screwed. See, and I was sitting in the Congress where you sit in the banking committee in 1973 when Nixon came and ended the stability of the global economic order. And nobody ever discussed it anymore, but I never forgot it. But America ran the world from 1944 to 1974. Everybody's currency was tied to the dollar, and the dollar was tied to gold, and the whole world was growing from 6 to 10%. Now, with the Europeans taking over the economy, Europe is in a desperate recession. They are not growing, and the Republicans want to have a balanced budget like Germany, and German business is coming to Atlanta. See, because it ain't working over there. And we don't have we have separated ourselves. We've almost seceded from the US economy in Atlanta. And we're part of the global economy. So, and all I'm saying is we can run the global economy. And I don't want us to get bogged down in the problems we have. One of the things I learned from my old folks was, please don't move these mountains, just give me the strength to climb. Don't take away the stumbling blocks. Just lead us on around. See, that we have a special role here and a special vision, and we shouldn't limit ourselves to what white folks are still saying, because by and large, even the better ones are still thinking of the world in terms of 19th century European economics. Now, every now and then you get somebody like Elizabeth Warren that breaks out, say, and you get, they're few. But for the most part, we're letting the French and the IMF run the economy. And they don't know what they're doing because it's not working for anybody but them. And it's not even working that good for them. That's why the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. That's not an accident, not because we're dumb. It's because somebody has rigged the game. And I'm trying to unrig the game. And that's all we've been, and we need to do that. We do not need to play this game. We need to make it work like we're all God's children. Finally, there's an argument in Mandela's last book saying where he and Ahmed Kathrada are talking about a multiracial society. And Mandela says, no, that will never work. There are too many divisions, too many cults, too many. He says, we have to have a non-racial society. And I took issue with that at first. And then I realized that's true. That ultimately, we have got to see ourselves as spiritual beings who are united in one cause to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, heal the sick, set at liberty those who are oppressed. And it doesn't matter what color they are, where they came from, or what their problems are. We're here to set people free.
And now for the benediction, Ryan Mack. Ryan?
Hey, Roland, I can leave you with a positive note on this that sort of wraps up Ambassador Young's desire for big thinking, progressive thinking, focusing on solutions, and bringing us all together. Your talk, your and my conversation about don't forget the micro. All this, frankly, going back to the Freedman's Bank, it was inspired a woman, Maggie Walker, to create a bank after the Freedman's Bank that survived to 2009. And even when Dr. King was focusing on money, he didn't get there by himself. It was Marian Wright Edelman, Children's Defense Fund, whispered into his ear and said the next movement was about money. And even when Dr. King got killed, Rainbows After Storms, her niece, Debbie Wright, was CEO of Carver Federal Bank in Harlem until last year, which was one of the largest black banks in America. So even when you fall, sometimes you fall forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so women have this wonderful, untapped, untold story in this work of civil rights. I think the best is yet to come. I think it's going to be the decade of the woman. That's another conversation. But Roland, I'm going to say today that sometimes these conversations get too well. It's a lot of words. PhDs are good. PhDs are better. Earlier today, Joseph Otting flew from California here, CEO of One West Bank. They're about to be $70 billion. He committed in a private luncheon today, pledged to open 100 Hope Inside locations in the city of Los Angeles alone. So I think that's the best way to sort of give life to the Freedman's Bank mission. We already have 100 locations we've opened last year. We're going to open, I think we're going to have pledges of, I don't want to get too far. People think I'm crazy if I say the numbers in my head, but let's just say conservatively, I think we're going to have 300 Hope Inside location pledges this year alone, making us a Starbucks of financial inclusion. But you got to be crazy to think big thoughts like this.
Right.
You really got to be a little off to say the stuff that he and I and all of us are saying. But only crazy people change the world.
But it's also biblical. Habakkuk chapter 2.
You know your stuff. I just put on Twitter, by the way, I said, Roland is brilliant. I mean, isn't he fantastic?
Yes.
I'm a preacher. You got to tell me what Habakkuk chapter 2 is.
Write the vision down, make it plain, but also wait on him to let you know where to go.
Amen.
Hey, and we did all this, and Barry still has his job.
Ryan Mack.
Well, with that, I would like to say thank you for the panel today. It was a great panel. We have another whole program. If you can, you can feel free to.
Man, just tell us to go.
You can walk off.
He don't know how to say it. Can y'all get off the stage?
Exit. You gotta get out of here.
Yeah, go home. You gotta get off the stage.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you, man. We still have a program, everybody. We still have a program. Nobody leave yet. No one leave just yet. No one leave. The program goes on. We're still here till another 30 minutes, but we have a couple of announcements we wanted to make. Well, first of all, I wanted to see, is Patricia Mitchell in the house? Is she here with Industrial Bank? Is she here? Is she here? She's not here? Well, I just wanted to give kudos and congratulate for 80 years, the largest Black-owned bank in the city of DC, Industrial Bank. Vidor Mitchell is out of town, was not able to be here. I thought Patricia was here, but she's the executive vice president, the sister of Vidor Mitchell. They just celebrated their 80th year, so definitely wanted to congratulate them. Now, I think it's always good to know where the rubber meets the road. And in the Hope Inside, I know individuals are talking about what exactly is a Hope Inside. Well, a Hope Inside is essentially one of those things that I get to see every day. That's where we work at Operation Hope. And every single day we see Hope Inside. We have a lot of the Hope staff that's back door right now. We have Dion and Michelle and Latera and Omari and Cedric and Cynthia and Teresa, all doing fabulous work every single day, empowering youth and adults. I mean, I've seen individuals with 500 credit scores come in, and months later, they have a 750 FICO score. I've seen individuals with nothing more than just a dream of wanting to purchase a home, walk in, and months later they talk to Cedric, and next thing you know, they have a brand new house and they signed a mortgage for a new home. And we also have our small business program under Cynthia Harrison, where tonight I wanted to make an announcement that I'm very proud of these individuals, what they've been able to do. We recently had a program where essentially it's almost like a Shark Tank program, right? And there were hundreds of applicants from all through DC. And out of all hundreds of applicants, they weeded them all down to only 15 applicants. And of the 10 finalists, 6 were Operation Hope graduates of our program. Okay. And then to go that even further, the individual who presented earlier today, Anthony McFarland, number 1 and 2 were Operation Hope graduates. So just last week, Anthony McFarland won a $10,000 grant to start or continue to start his new business. That's in the second grant that he actually received coming from our program. And to this evening, we have the number 2 person. So I wanted to give them an award, to give them some recognition, to have them just come up and just say a few words about their experience. And please feel free to just to come up and just talk about the Care Essence Massage Therapy Spa. I mean, look, they've been doing their thing. So again, thank you so much, Nicole Ruffin and Lou Ruffin, husband and wife. I mean, a lot of times people talking about, can I get a job? But these folks are learning how to create their own jobs. So I want to get a few words to them as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My name is Nicole Ruffin, and myself and my husband, Lou Ruffin, are the CEOs of Care Essence Therapeutic Massage. The business is 9 years old. It started as a home-based business in my home and a mobile business. And then we moved into Greenbelt, Maryland in 2011, where we provide massage, facials, acupuncture, and body wraps. And what I discovered is before massage therapy, I was in healthcare. I graduated from a HBCU and got a degree in chemistry, and I worked in Washington Hospital Center for 20 years. And so I know a lot about being a care provider. But last year, I became a care provider for my husband, who had 2 brain surgeries. And so I had to spend the time away from the business and direct my attention to my home. And because as a small business, we, when I was away from the business started, it only grew, it only received revenue when I was focusing on the business. And so I decided, after he recovered, I found out about the Operation Hope, and I took the entrepreneurship training course. And my instructor, I don't see her in here, Cynthia Harrison, taught us about building the business plan, taught us about marketing, research, and our financials and budgeting, things like that, which was very helpful because it allowed me to create a new platform and a new way to generate more revenue. And so I am so thankful for the opportunity that Operation Hope has given me. And I I just do whatever Cynthia Harrison tells me to do. I mean, everything she recommends, I just follow her. And so when we did the pitch, that was my first experience with doing the pitch, and it allowed me to revamp my niche, which was, you know, I mean, I'm grateful for the experience that I have with having the office, but with this program, I have been given the market or niche approach, which is that Care Essence is offering, we are the caregivers for caregivers. So what we're looking to do within the next 6 or 7 months, we've started already, we're starting with the clients that we already have, is we're going to go into the healthcare environments, hospitals, nursing homes, and outpatient facilities to offer chair massage services to the staff so that we can educate them on how to take care of themselves. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Again, that's what a So we are again. Well, just really briefly, just what we have left for the day is we have a very quick presentation, and then we will have another announcement by our chairman, and then after that, we're gonna get some cocktails. I know we've held y'all in here for a decent amount of time. I mean, I had a schedule here, but you know, Andrew Young, you know what I'm saying, kind of. So, what you gonna do, right? So, well, I mean, if there's anybody else that we can hold it over a long time for, I mean, that right there, that's history in the making, right? My God, that's history today. This is like a moment in history. It was blowing my mind just listening to him speak. So, without further ado, I want to present Brother Damani Davis, an archivist from the National Archives Research Services Division here in Washington, D.C. He's a graduate of Coppin State University in Baltimore and received his MA in history at the Ohio State University. See, I know how to Columbus, Ohio. He is an expert in and has lectured at national, regional, and local conferences on African American history and genealogy. Please welcome for a special historic presentation on the Freedman's Bank National Archives archivist, Mr. Damani Davis.
Good evening and welcome to the National Archives. We here at the National Archives just wanted to give you a brief presentation on some of the Freedman's Bank records, because most people are not familiar with the records. Here at the National Archives, I guess the largest amount of patrons that we have coming here now are family historians and genealogical researchers, because due to some of the recent television programs such as African American Lives, Who Do You Think You Are, and so forth, over the past 10 years, the interest in genealogical research has really skyrocketed amongst African Americans. So just so you can have an idea of the type of information you can find within some of these records, and if you have ancestors who may have opened accounts in the Freedman's Bank or made deposits, potentially you could find information on these ancestors or ancestors that you didn't know about, because oftentimes in these records, they will give information on family members for genealogical purposes, especially as it pertains to African Americans. Oftentimes, or sometimes, they will even give the names of their former slave owners. Now, I know some of you may not be interested in knowing the names of the persons who own your family, but if you're the descendant of enslaved persons. But from a genealogical perspective, information on the slaveholding family is the most important type of information you're going to get, because it's within the records of the slaveholding family that you're going to get the records on your ancestors. So just to give, I'm not going to go too long into this, because I know most of us are trying to get out before the snowstorm or ice storm or whatever comes through. But I know some of you have seen this photograph of the actual building of the Freedman's Bank as it existed. Today, 150 years ago, March 3rd, 1865, the Freedman's Bank was officially signed into law by President Lincoln. It was conceived of initially by an abolitionist Congregationalist minister named John W. Alford, who was originally from New England. During General Tecumseh Sherman's march through Georgia, John Alford accompanied the troops as an attaché or as a chaplain, serving the soldiers. And as Sherman marched through Georgia, I mean, most of us are familiar with Sherman's special field order number 15, in which, after seeing the conditions of the recently freed population, he felt that since these human beings had tilled this soil, or along the coast of the Carolinas and Florida, he felt that they legitimately deserved ownership of that land that they had lived on for generations and that they had, toiled. So special order number 15 generated the concept of 40 acres and a mule. As you know, after President Lincoln was assassinated and Andrew Young became, President Andrew Johnson, basically a lot of these initiatives were overturned by Andrew Johnson. So he rescinded special order number 15, and since the 40 acres and a mule was no longer a promise, that was a severe disappointment to many of these recently freed Afro-Americans because they felt they deserved the land, but they had to move on. As they moved into the position of wage laborers, many of them had no experience with any type of financial institution or handling money at all. So John W. Alford, he took up where special order number 15 kind of left off. There had already been some prior financial institutions established by Union troops, because of course we had the U.S. colored troops. The U.S. colored troops were making wages, but many of them had nowhere or no type of institution in which they could deposit or save their money. So John W. Alford met with philanthropists in New York, explained the problem to these men, and they felt that it was a worthy cause, a worthy enterprise. The Freedman's Bank took some of the ideas that from some of the soldiers in the Union, or some of the officers in the Union troops, and established it on a larger basis. Okay. Unfortunately, as we've already touched upon, the Freedman's Bank eventually failed. Initially, the Freedman's Bank was to serve as a simple savings bank. It was established on very secure principles. The deposits would be invested only in secure government bonds, treasury notes, and so forth. But in 1870, the original charter signed by Congress was changed. And from that point, it opened the door to speculation, loans, and so forth. And along with the recession of 1873, it led to the collapse of the bank. This collapse was devastating to the African Americans, this recently freed population that was investing all of their money into the bank. Their hope was that despite the fact that they didn't get the land, they hoped to be able to save their little wages in order to buy some land and to buy homes. Speaking of the severe blow, this trauma that they went through due to the closure of the Freedman's Bank, my former colleague here, recently retired Reginald Washington, phrases it this way: the closure of the Freedman's Bank devastated the African American community. An idea that began as a well-meaning experiment in philanthropy had turned into an economic nightmare for tens of thousands of African Americans who had entrusted their hard-earned money to the bank. Contrary to what many of its depositors were led to believe, the bank's assets were not protected by the federal government. Perhaps more far-reaching than the immediate loss of their tiny deposits was the deadening effect the bank's closure had on many of the depositors' hopes and dreams of a brighter future. The bank's demise left bitter feelings of betrayal, abandonment, and distrust of the American banking system that would remain in the African American community for many years. While half of the depositors eventually received about 3/5 of the value of their accounts, others received nothing. Some depositors and their descendants spent more than 30 years petitioning Congress for reimbursement of their losses. Okay. Oh, to get more information on the history of the Freedman's Bank, for those who are not well familiar with it, we have a great article in the National Archives quarterly journal called Prologue. You can go online at www.archives.gov and read this particular article by Reginald Washington that goes into a little more detail of the Freedman's Bank. And also, for those who are interested in the Senate investigations of the failure of the Freedman's Bank, this is the citation of one of them from 1879. It's printed in the Congressional Serial Set. You can also go online and find this information and read the actual investigation. There were actually two investigations, one by a Senate committee, another by a House committee. Frederick Douglass actually testified in one of these investigations. Offhand, I can't remember which one it was. Okay, now let's go into the records. The Freedman's Bank, as far as the records we have surviving records from 29 banks. And the records that we have are, of course, records of the depositors into the bank. At its peak, the bank operated 37 branches in 17 states, including the District of Columbia, making it one of the first multi-state banks in the nation. Not all of these banks were in the historical South or the former Confederate states. New York had a branch, Philadelphia had one. Some of the cities in the border state there was a bank in Baltimore, and of course the headquarters was right here in Washington. Okay. What kind of information can you find in these records? You can find the name of the depositor, the account number, ages, complexions and physical descriptions, date of application, place of birth, place where raised, occupations, information on spouses, children, names of parents and siblings, and other remarks. Not all of these accounts were opened by individuals. Some were actually opened by institutions such as churches. You know, an entire church would have members who would make a collective deposit on the behalf of the church. So sometimes you can find information on some of the older Black churches. Okay. For those who are interested in some of the more detailed administrative records, this is just some of the microfilm publications that we have that you can research, in particular M874 if you're interested in some of the records of the Board of Trustees and so forth, you can do that. Okay, now let's go into some examples. This individual here is Captain OSB Wall. He was the first African-American commissioned captain in the regular army during the Civil War. And he has several accounts in the Freedman's Bank. This is an example of what the typical deposit record, this is how it appears. Gives some real basic information on the person. For instance, for OSB Wall, it gives his physical description, describes him as 5'10" in height, mulatto complexion. It gives the names of his children: Edward, Stephen, Sally, and Bell. His place of birth, Richmond County, North Carolina. His place of residence at this particular time when he opened the account was Oberlin in Lorain County, Ohio. He actually went to school in Oberlin. And his occupation is listed as an employment agent for the Freedmen's Bureau, which is another source of records that are very useful here at the National Archives for those who are trying to trace African-American ancestors. John Wesley Cromwell. He was a historian, journalist, educator, lawyer, and former slave who was born in Portsmouth, Virginia. In 1851, his family purchased their own freedom and moved to Philadelphia. Later, after the Civil War, John Wesley Cromwell moved to Washington, D.C. He attended Howard Law School and established a Black newspaper here in Washington. Here's his particular Freedman's Bank account. It gives the date that he opened the account, his place of birth, Portsmouth, Virginia, place where raised, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At this time, his place of residence, he gives Howard University. His age is 25. His occupation is listed as teacher, gives the name of his father, Willis H. Cromwell, and his mother, who is deceased. Also gives the names of his siblings, Levi, Willis, Armstead, Martha Ann, and Esther Nash. Okay. Just to give an example of when you're doing research, or historical research or genealogical research, oftentimes it's very common for names to be misspelled or for there to be discrepancies in the information. I just use this particular Freedman's Bank record as an example because in each one of the records that we have on him, there's a different variation on the spelling of his name. Here we have Reuben Pennell. This account is from 1867. For genealogical purposes, some real good information that he gives is the name of his former master from when he was enslaved. His master's name is given as Martin Stouter, and his mistress, who will be the master's wife, was Betsy. Gives his physical description, 5'4", light brown complexion, name of his child, Benjamin Pennell. His place of birth was King William County, Virginia, and his current place of residence is listed as 18th Street between L and M in Washington, D.C. A later Freedman's Bank account that he has is from 1873. His age is listed as 62, gives his complexion is dark. His place of residence is the same, occupation laborer, but this one also gives the name of his wife, Eliza Pennell, which wasn't given in the first Freedman's Bank account. But his name is spelled differently. You can't see it all up there, but the name is spelled a little different. Now, here in the National Archives, we also have Freedman's Bureau records. These records are not as easy to research as the Freedman's Bank because fortunately, the Freedman's Bank records have been digitized, so you can go online on sites such as Ancestry, Family Search, and so forth. Just type the name of your ancestor in a particular state, and hopefully, if they open a Freedman's Bank account, it will come up. We advise researchers to not rely solely on databases because if any information was entered wrong, if they entered the name of the ancestor wrong, nothing will come up if you put the name in. So always go to the original record just to be sure if you suspect that you may have an ancestor who opened an account. But the Freedmen's Bureau records, because they're so voluminous, there's no comprehensive name or subject index for the Freedmen's Bureau records. But the information in these records are very valuable. Here we have a marriage record from the Freedmen's Bureau records from here in Washington, D.C. It's the same couple, Reuben Pennell and Eliza Henderson. It gives her maiden name. And basically what the Freedmen's Bureau was doing was legalizing the marriages of formerly enslaved persons because under slavery, there was no legal recognition of their marriages. Within these records, you can find individuals who say they considered themselves married for 50 years, 60 years, people with grandchildren and so forth, but all of them are going to the Freedmen's Bureau to get their marriages legally recognized for the first time and get official marriage certificates because within slavery, they only had a slave marriage where they jumped the broom, but at any time they could be sold away because there was no lead. They could be sold away from each other. A person could be sold away from their spouse or their children because there was no legal recognition of family bonds. And that's something that, is very common in some of the records that we have. Okay. And just another variation of the name. This is a census record, which is another commonly used federal record that we have at the National Archives that people use for genealogical research, just confirming that the family is right here in Washington, D.C., but also showing how when you do research in federal records, don't view any of these records in isolation. You know, you can go to the Freedmen's Bureau of Records, but also always try to connect it with other records, other federal records that we have here within the National Archives. But even then, the federal records are only one component. You also need to go to the local level, to state levels, to find records that may be in church archives, local state archives, and so forth. Okay, here's another interesting person from right here in Washington, D.C. This is an example of someone opening a Freedman's Bank account on behalf of a church. Alfred Pope was a leading member of the Washington, D.C. Black community at the turn of the previous century, 1800s going into the 1900s, but he's making an account on behalf of Mount Zion Church in Georgetown, and it has the name of other members of the banking committee of that particular church. Okay. A later account gives more similar information. His residence, Georgetown, gives the name of his wife, and so forth. Here's the wife, a separate account that she opened. It gives information where she's living at the time, information on the children, and so forth. Okay. And here is another record that once you begin researching one type of record, it can eventually lead to other records. Here's Alfred Pope's Affidavit of Freedom, which he received here in Washington, D.C. before the Emancipation Proclamation, because the Washington, D.C. received liberation of slaves in April of 1862, prior to the Emancipation Proclamation. And it just gives some background information on this individual. The bearer, Alfred Pope, a colored man who will hand you this note, was a servant of the late Colonel John Carter of this town. And by Colonel Carter's will, Alfred was set free and is now, with my consent, as executor in enjoyment of his freedom. Alfred caused this necessary certificate of his freedom to be entered on record in your office and had in his possession a certified copy. But about a week ago, his dwelling or house took fire in the night, and it was destroyed with all of the furniture. So just showing how different types of records can be found. And once you investigate one record, it can lead to clues on information you can find in other records. Here's Alfred Pope and Hannah Cole's Freedmen's Bureau marriage record, which confirms the information that was within the Freedman's Bank records, you know, showing that they were married. And here's their marriage being legalized, you know, after slavery. Here's the family in the census. And another census. And the rest of these records basically gives the same type of information. It's not going into deep details. It's giving the names of families, occupations, potentially the former slaveholder. But for genealogical purposes, when you're doing that type of research, you're approaching it from the standpoint of a private investigator. So any information you get, any tidbit of information, any clues is always valuable, because it can lead to other records, and it creates a snowball effect where the more little pieces of information you get, names, places, dates, and so forth, it can help you gather more information, okay? And I'm gonna kind of go on through, basically the rest of these records just show how you can do that and show the value of Freedman's Bank records. But before I close, I want to just show something else that you can find in Freedman's Bank records that kind of reveals some of the tragic history that many of these individuals had gone through. Many of these Freedman's Bank records, especially when you look at states such as Mississippi, Louisiana, and so forth, many of these individuals were born in places such as Richmond, Virginia, mainly this particular region that we're in, the Chesapeake region, Maryland and Virginia, multitudes of people. When you look at the Vicksburg Freedman's Bank records, Natchez, Mississippi, certain places in Louisiana, over and over again on almost every roll, you're finding people who were born, when they ask for their place of birth, they're saying Eastern Shore of Maryland, Frederick, Maryland, Baltimore, Maryland, Washington, D.C., Prince George's County. What that represents is the internal or the domestic slave trade that occurred after 1808. After 1808, the transatlantic slave trade was ended. So in this particular region, which was formerly based on the cultivation of tobacco, tobacco cultivation was no longer as lucrative as it once was. But this was the oldest area of what was considered the South. So they considered themselves to have a surplus slave population. This is where the largest amount of slaves were. Virginia, even at the end of the Civil War, had the largest Black population. But what occurred during that period is many of the slaveholders in this region who no longer needed that surplus labor, they began to sell that surplus enslaved labor to the new states of the expanding cotton belt. That expanded. Initially, they would sell them down to Georgia. So you will hear Frederick Douglass in his autobiography talking about the fear they had of being sold down to Georgia, because that was, initially when Georgia and South Carolina were being established, many of them were being sold there. But it was exacerbated as slavery began to spread from, Georgia into Mississippi, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and so forth. So in all of these records, you see evidence of that. These two individuals here, born in Richmond, Virginia, ask about, family members. They give the names of family members. Sometimes they say, as far as they know, their parents are dead. Other times they say they don't know. They don't know where the status of their, parents or siblings and so forth. Okay. Just a few more examples. This person here to your left says he was born in Maryland. He was brought up or raised in the city of Washington, D.C., but his residence now is Natchez, Mississippi. Gives his occupation, he's a wood sawyer. Gives information on his wife and children, Julia, Ann Green, and so forth. When asked about his father, he says he doesn't know. He doesn't know the status of his father, and ditto on his mother. So he's been essentially sold away. Another person to your right is another person from Washington, D.C., who was raised in Washington, D.C., but is now in Natchez, Mississippi. Again, indicating that internal slave trade that occurred. Maryland Eastern Shore on one, Prince George's County, Maryland. Frederick, Virginia, state of Virginia, now in Mississippi. So essentially, most of the individuals that we have here are family historians and genealogists. We also have historians who come here who examine these records in order to glean some of this information and to try to reconstruct and build some type of idea or knowledge of what was occurring at that time and documenting it with actual records. So can't go any longer. Before we close, I would just like to open the floor up to questions. If anyone has any questions. Oh, up here? Yes. Excuse me? We don't have an actual genealogy website. We have on www.archives.gov, we have a page on there that gives information on all events that we have here within the National Archives. So throughout every week, we have different presentations such as a Know Your Records program that talks about and examines different records. Every April, we have a genealogy fair that is, virtual. It used to be a big fair that we had outside in front of the building. It's now virtual, meaning you could go online and watch any of the presenters. And they speak upon all different types of topics relating to genealogy. But even after the presentations, oftentimes they still are held on YouTube. You can go on YouTube and watch them. So. Excuse me? It depends on the particular record. Records that haven't been digitized, the majority of the records haven't been digitized because there's just too many of these various records. Like the Freedmen's Bureau records aren't digital. Well, some of them have been digitized, but the majority of them haven't. Freedmen's Bureau records are on microfilm. And at this time, that's really the only way you can research them, is just going to the particular state where you think you had ancestors, narrowing it down to the particular county and the field office that had jurisdiction over that county, and just scrolling through the microfilm, hoping that you can find something on your ancestors. At some point, we hope these records can be digitized. Freedman's Bank records are digitized at this time, so you don't have to go to microfilm for those. You can go online. Also, anytime you're in any National Archives facility, you have free access to all of these independent sites that have digitized our records. So if you don't have a subscription with Ancestry.com or with Heritage Quest, I think Family Search is available to anyone without subscription, but definitely Ancestry and Fold3 is another one. Anytime you're within any of our facilities, you have free access to it on our public access computers. You can just go on Ancestry. Like if you want to research Freedman's Bank, you can just go on our computers and do all of the research you would like to do on those particular records.
Getting here and what to do, like all that information in there so that people know they can go to the website just to find out when they're able to come here to be able to do the research?
Yes, most of it is there, but honestly, from the feedback we've received from some customers, oftentimes our website is difficult to navigate, and we have received complaints about that. But if you stay on there and just play around with it, you can finally find what it is that you're looking for. Yeah, but for the most part, when you on the front page of the website, they are kind of good now at having a list of all of the upcoming monthly events. So, so somewhat you get some information to point you in a direction, but from that point, if you don't have everything you're looking for, you can just call. It has the numbers, and our specialists and archivists here can lead you from that point. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
What did I say poverty was? It's not believing in yourself. If you don't know who you are when you get up in the morning, by dinner time, somebody will tell you. So to fulfill your dreams, to live in this world, and to have self-determination, freedom, first and foremost, takes self-esteem and self-belief. And so when I talk about faith and confidence and self-esteem and talking about growing up, talking about my life, was ever since I can remember, my mother told me she loved me every day of my life growing up. And so I never really had a self-esteem problem. I always sort of had confidence in myself and knew who I was, or at least knew I was somebody. If I didn't know who I was totally, I knew that I was on the track to be somebody. When I talk about role models, I'm talking about my father. And I knew from my dad that I could do anything I wanted to do because I saw him do it. So I got a sense of yes, I am from my mother. And yes, I can from my father. sometimes it takes a stranger to show you what's right in front of you. So when I was 9 years old, a banker came in my classroom in Compton, California, taught a course in financial literacy. He told me he was a banker and he financed entrepreneurs. I said, look, I don't know what an entrepreneur is, but I want to be one. And the endorphins kicked in the right side of my brain around hope and aspiration, around faith, around confidence, around joy, belief. That role modeling and that self-esteem and that confidence served as a platform for my life, and that created an environment for me. Nobody in my neighborhood wore suits. Nobody in my neighborhood had a business card. Nobody in my neighborhood had a salary. No one in my neighborhood was an entrepreneur or a small business owner. I didn't even know what those phrases meant. And environment, very quickly or very simply, is if you hang around 9 broke people, you'll be the 10th. I mean, you model what you see. And then the last part is aspiration and opportunity. Literally, aspiration is translated as hope. And the most dangerous person in the world is a person with no hope. If I don't have a high self-esteem, if I don't have a high level of confidence, if I don't have great role models, if I have a crappy environment, if I have low levels of hope, then I'm going to have a real deficit of opportunity. That defines poverty. The opposite defines wealth. And that's the philosophy behind the hope doctrine on poverty.
Ladies and gentlemen, my friend, my chairman, my boss, and my mentor, Chairman John O'Brien.
My mother always said, you never want to be the old guy in the club. So before you kick me out, we're going to leave. It's been a good day. I want to thank C-SPAN for covering this historic acknowledgement of the Freedman's Bank on the 150th anniversary. I want to thank Roland Martin Show for covering the 150th anniversary of the Freedman's Bank. I want to thank the National Archives. If you've never been here, it must hit you walking in here. This is a gorgeous, amazing, untapped reservoir of America. I don't know if you know this, but every precious jewel of America's history is in this place. The Constitution, the original, the Bill of Rights, the original, the Emancipation Proclamation, the original. Everything that you hold dear, that articulates and explains the spirit of this country is in this building. And it is yours. It's a public asset. And I'm just honored that they felt it worthy to dedicate a day for this almost lost piece of history. And so in some ways, you have played a part in history today because you've helped to redeem the soul of the Freedman's Bank, which up until now was nothing more than a plaque on the outside of the building of Treasury Extension. Nothing more than a plaque. People who work in the building at Treasury Annex did not know it was a Freedman's Bank building, walked by the plaque every day and never have noticed it. It takes somebody to stop, because in DC, the urgent always crowds out the important. It takes somebody to stop and say, no, this is relevant and it's real and it's meaningful. And even though you may not be getting paid from it today, even though you may not be getting an advancement from it today, where would you be if this had not happened yesterday? We all owe a debt. I owe a debt to that man, Ambassador Andrew Young. I mean, that is the closest thing we have to Nelson Mandela in the United States of America. And I listen and I learn something from him every time he talks. I don't know if you notice, but he irritates me intentionally. I mean, he's always pushing me, trying to make me better. And I appreciate that. I want to acknowledge Ted Beck, who's here from the President's Council on Financial Capability for Young Americans. If there are any other council members who are here, I see some friends from CFPB who are here and some friends from the FDIC, Mooney, who are here, and all the heroes and sheroes of the civil rights movement. Thank you for being here. I thought before we wrapped up and sort of end on a high note, to take a few questions if you have them on anything that's on your mind. Sir.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you. My name is Steve Galloway, and I'm a leadership and empowerment consultant. And I'm very impressed with your approach and philosophy, especially with confidence and esteem being the foundation. Can you share any more about how confidence and self-esteem can be inspired by the other organizations or the other organizations that help sponsor and do work with your operation?
I was actually asking for the handheld for me, but he'll take it too. Did everybody hear that question? Yeah. So let me so I can walk and talk. I think that, by the way, is it okay for us to do a little Q&A? So I don't want to wear you out. We won't do this for long. I think that half of poverty, first of all, poverty has nothing to do with money. Nothing. Yeah. So now that's a pretty radical statement, because for 50 years, all the experts have been telling us that poverty is about money. Now the government has a responsibility, and they're right, to articulate what's sustenance poverty. What is the level in which you cannot function financially? They have a right responsibility to do this. $27,000, or it's between 24 and 27,000. Blah 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 for a family of four. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what's going to hold you back. Whether you're here or Zimbabwe or Egypt or South Africa or Detroit, what's going to hold you back? And I think that is half lack of confidence in yourself and low self-esteem. If you don't know who you are at 9 a.m, by dinner time, somebody's going to tell you. And I think I'm going to say something pretty radical now, as if everything else I hadn't said was radical. I think that because of 200 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow that ended basically in 1960, in our lifetime, I think that 70% of Black Americans are clinically undiagnosed depressed. It makes perfect sense. And it also explains why we respond to certain things in way. It explains the anger, the frustration, the fact that we've given up hope in many ways, the fact that we're not skeptical, we're cynical. We see the glasses half full, not half empty. It explains so much why we don't vote on a regular basis like we should. It explains a lot. And once we can address that, be honest about that. And by the way, this graph I mentioned, this applies to everybody. This is not a Black doctrine. This is a doctrine. If you have low self-esteem and lack of belief in yourself, that's poverty. If you have crappy role models and a crappy environment, and it is going to lead to no low hope and a sense of no opportunity, that applies to white rural poverty. It applies to everybody. It's just, all I'm saying is, when white folks have a headache, Black folks have pneumonia. But we're all sick. So how do you address that? How do you arrest that? Well, we can sit and talk about families all day, but that's not going to solve it. We know that families, the crumbling family is a crisis. So the thing I mentioned to you earlier, the B- business compact, is my attempt to replicate what happened in my family. So my mother told me she loved me every day of my life. I didn't have a self-esteem problem. My dad owned his own business. I'm not a genius. I'm role modeling. Why am I a businessman? My daddy was, right? Why do you wear a suit? You saw a black man wearing a suit and said, I can do that, right? And so then somebody came in my classroom, taught me financial literacy. He was a banker, happened to be white, didn't matter. He was green as far as I was concerned. Currency. So whether you're white, black, red, brown, or yellow today, we say the real color is green. And so he was a banker. I was 9 years old. I said, what do you do for a living? And how'd you get rich legally? And I was serious because nobody in my neighborhood wore suits. He said, I'm a banker and I finance entrepreneurs. As God is my witness, I said, I don't know what an entrepreneur is, but I want to be one. And I started my first business the next year, the neighborhood candy house. Now, my point is that triangle, the love, the role modeling, and the tools. That's left brain, right brain, and action. What we tend to do is just do the left brain. And what I tell my wealthy friends is, if poverty was rational, poor people wouldn't be poor. Poverty is highly irrational. So you've got to click to the right brain, which is why I say you got to connect education with aspiration. That's why the Hope B- Business Compact, $41.60 a month, is something that everybody can do. You don't have to wait for the president to do it. You don't have to wait for the governor to do it. You don't have to wait for the mayor to do it. You don't need legislation to pass. Everybody can give some young person a transformational experience where backpacks connects to briefcases and a schoolhouse connects to office buildings, because that kid can't relate to that office building. They don't know what's in there. Why do our kids want to be rap stars, athletes, and drug dealers? They're not dumb. They're brilliant. They're modeling what they see. So my vision is just to give them something different to see. And a 6-week internship, I think, is transformational. Because the endorphins will kick in the right side of that kid's head. And they will start to dream about and then they'll build relationships in that. And unless the people working in the company or the government office, whatever, has blue ink running through their veins versus blood, they're going to say in 6 weeks, this kid, you're pretty bright. Why don't you stick around for a little while? They did this in Taiwan, and it was unpaid internships because they didn't have any money. In Taiwan, for college students, 70% of the unpaid interns were hired into jobs. So I think you can transform an entire generation, and you don't need institutions to do it. Everybody can do $41.60 a month, which is $500 a year. So we're going to do this nationwide. I'm going to pick on CEOs to try to get some scale, but I think that you can say, I'm going to do this in my neighborhood, right? And by the way, it doesn't have to go through Operation Hope. You can steal my software and go do this is open source software. I just think that it's time for a new movement. Yeah. Talk a little louder so the cameras can hear you.
There's a question at the end of this comment, but I think oftentimes you go around spreading hope and inspiration. But I have a story that's connected to you.
We don't have time for a story, but
the story is that you actually changed my life 10 years ago in an airport in Abuja, Nigeria.
Ooh.
Yeah. And at the time of the conversation, Ambassador Young, there was a bunch of us sitting around the room, and I didn't understand the conversation because something did happen to me at that time. And when I asked y'all, I want to be a part of this conversation, I want to be able to communicate, and the response was read. Well, at the time, I was a dropout of school, and I was pushed through school because I was an athlete, so I didn't have much of an education. But I went back to school in 2006 and realized I didn't know how to read. Holding community college, I realized I didn't know how to read, but I taught myself how to read. Went to community college, just graduated in December with a degree in business, and now I'm a junior in University of Baltimore studying entrepreneurship.
Wow. I was wrong about not having time for a story. You want the mic? My God. You have made the case. I'm going to start getting some T-shirts made. On the front of the T-shirts, it will say, Quincy Jones says it takes 20 years to change the culture. That's going to be small letters. Big letters. In the last 20 years, we've made dumb sexy. We've dumbed down and celebrated it. The back of the t-shirt will say, we've got to make smart sexy again. You're making smart sexy. There's no reason why, because it happened. There were generations where this was the uniform in black. By the way, I keep talking about Black America. I really mean everybody, but of course, this is the 150th anniversary of the Freedman's Bank, so please don't think that I'm just having a black conversation. But in the black community, for Dr. Cole, I saw her here, who wrote a brilliant treatise on the Freedman's Bank. If you don't know who this lady is, she is at the Treasury Department. She is a genius, and she wrote a brilliant treatise that hopefully she gets to everybody. I am framing my copy, but it taught me something. The Freedman's Bank story is a wonderful story, and if you look at that whole era, you saw black people in suits and ties. That was the uniform. No different than those raggedy pants down to your knees are the uniform today. There's nothing wrong with our kids. We just been hijacked by thug culture. You hear that? There's nothing wrong with our kids. All we're doing is what we've done. So we've just been hijacked by thug culture, but we can go back. That's why when I go into a school, I don't dumb down, dress down, or talk down. I come suited and booted just like this. So I'm going to go back to you for a minute. And I was telling Roland Martin, I went to a school in Oakland. I want to go talk to the so-called worst schools in America. And kids were throwing stuff. And I walked in 600 kids talking at the same time. And the principal was trying to calm down. I said, please stop. I walked in the middle of the auditorium and just stood there like this. You know what happened? Completely quiet. Kid's not dumb. Now, I knew I had him for about 45 seconds. So I found what I knew was the toughest dude in the auditorium. You know how he was dressed. I don't want to say it. It hurts my heart to tell you how he was dressed. But you know what I'm talking. It was a uniform. White shirt, raggedy pants, no shoelaces in. He's sitting there. Can I do it? Yo, man, what's up? So let's say his name is Bobby. I said, Bobby, what's up, you man? I said, how old are you? 18. Okay. I said, right now you're 45. No, I'm 18. No, and this example, you're 45. You now work for IBM or Google, whatever you think is coolest. You make a lot of money. You do really well. You have a daughter. Do you love your daughter? If I had a daughter, I love my daughter. Great. Would you do anything for your daughter? Anything for my daughter? Would you die for your daughter? I would die for my daughter. Great. There's a knock on the door. You open the door. On the door. Yo, man, what's up? You know what I'm saying? He's got tattoos on his shoulder. He's got gold tooth in his mouth. He's got he hasn't graduated, dropped out of school. He's got a public record. You follow me? And he, yo, man, what's up? You know what I'm saying? I'm here because I want to marry your daughter. I want your permission. I said, what do you say to him? Now, this is TV. I can't tell you what he said. But you can imagine, he said, you better get out of my yard, get off my porch. You're not marrying my daughter, not now, not ever. The whole audience did what? Applauded. They applauded. So I said, hey, let's say his name is Bob. I said, Bobby, let me ask you a question. That's a great answer. Why is it not good enough for your daughter, but it's good enough for you? He had never thought about it. He had never questioned himself. But if I tried to shame him, if I tried to talk down to him, he'd have just cut me. In fact, he would have turned the whole audience against me. I didn't have a problem the rest of the day because he was my protector. This is turnaroundable. We can solve these problems, but we got to reimagine how we address it and understand these young people are brilliant. But these kids who want to be rap stars, athletes, and drug dealers, the rap star is an illegal entrepreneur. The guy who's a gang leader is a frustrated union organizer. And the guy who's running from police could be Mario Andretti, could be being paid to race a car. But they don't. We've got to turn the negatives into positive. Next question. Turn the negatives into positive. Here and here. Yep. I'll make the answers crisper and shorter. Yep. It's a great question. The book, The Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell, University of Illinois study, proved that at 5% role models, every community stabilizes. Not 80% role models, not 50%, not 20%, not just 5, right? So you should go back to your neighborhood and everybody in here make a mission in the next 2 years, get the companies in your neighborhood, small businesses and large, to get 5% of those companies, just 5% of those companies in your neighborhood to bring internships into their companies. 5%, and you'll just transform your whole neighborhood. So 5% is doable, right? And it's solvable. You can get your hand around it. I would say just focus on what's in front of you, and understand that history never feels historic when you're sitting in it. It just feels like another day. It takes 20 years to look back at a moment and say that was historic. See, that was quick. Yep. Here. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. This is wonderful. I'm Barbara Simmons. I'm with the University of Southern University in Liberia. And in terms of revenue generation, is there a role for Operation Hope in terms of remittances? Because the diaspora, the African diaspora, is giving tons of millions of dollars, and there are organizations that are profiting from that. Is there a way that either your organization or some kind of format can be developed where some of those funds could be harnessed back into the community?
It's a brilliant question. The number one income stream for many of these countries, including Mexico and places like Nigeria, Nigeria has oil, behind that are remittances. It's a huge income stream. It's very significant. The Federal Reserve is doing something very positive around that, which nobody knows about, that gives you cheap forms of transferring remittances, even though we keep going to high-cost versions. The answer is no, though. Ambassador Young had the answer. The minute I get into the money game, the minute I become part of the transaction, I lose my credibility. I want to be the private banker of the poor. I don't want to be the bank. I mean, let ethical players who can capture your attention and who you think pass your sniff test. Let those people get the. I have no. Not only do I not have a problem with capitalism, I am a capitalist. I believe that people should benefit. I believe in enlightened self-interest. I think that we just need to have some honest ones. So I think that you should want folks to prosper, because when they prosper and do well, they create jobs, right? I mean, Goldman Sachs was a guy named Goldman and a guy named Sachs. And it was once a little small business. And Walmart was a guy named Sam Walton with a pickup truck. Every big business was once a small one. UPS was a guy named Jim Casey and a bicycle and $100. So I want responsible capitalists to succeed so that they can hire more people at a living wage. It's my role is to be Switzerland with a purpose. I'm neutral, leaning toward justice. That's why Hope Inside is located inside of XYZ locations, bank branches, et cetera. And why we help you, prep you, train you, nurture you, get your credit score up, and then reintroduce you back to yourself and give you options that then you can choose which institution you want to do business with, and you can decide who you want to nurture. I just don't think it's my role to get in the middle of that transaction. But you can create a company and take the share yourself. Here. If you can just make it crisp and talk louder and make it crisp so we can get a couple more questions in before we have to wrap up. He's about to give me the hook. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Okay. So I'm a DC resident. My daughter participated in the mayor program last summer, and she was an intern with Bank on Washington. And basically what they did was they taught the young people, no, I'm making a statement because, okay. So anyway, she participated. She went throughout the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area teaching young people about financial literacy. And some of the young people asked them questions. How do I save money? And why are you guys teaching us the significance of saving money when I need money because whatever personal situation? You talked about poverty, and you talked about the fact that you are built into your environment. But as young people, they are inquisitive. And my daughter came back at 17 years old to tell me what she learned and what she taught her own peers. So I think in the Washington, D.C. area, I think they are giving back on financial literacy. I think they are trying to teach the young people at young ages to save their money, to be investment savvy. And I just wanted, I had no question. I just wanted to make a statement that we are doing good things.
It's not a question, it's a statement. It's a great statement.
Oh,
But people have been sitting forever, and I'm really sensitive about it's a great statement. And who can be against it?
One more
I'm looking
question.
for questions. Yeah. One last question.
My name's Shalene Wright. My question is, banks don't work with people who have less than $50,000 on investments. And so I wanted to know, does Operation Hope have a segment that has either like a CPA or someone who can actually work with people who live in the DC area or wherever Operation Hope are that will help them plan for retirement?
Yes, and it's free. And there's a Hope inside at SunTrust Banks at 17th and 917th Street. He's the CEO of the local market. Be all over him like a cheap suit. Get his phone number, his cell phone number, his home number. Follow him home if you have to. Yes, we do that, and it's all 100% free and unbiased. Aerial Management, which happens to be an African American owned mutual fund company, I was told has an account you can start for as little as $50 a month. So you don't have to be a major investor to start a mutual fund account. By the way, last little widget for you. Young person makes $1,000. For all of you say, I can't do this. Kid makes $1,000 a month on a part-time job. He's 17 years old. Tell that kid take 10% and save it. Save it where? In a regular index mutual fund. If the kid saves $100 from age 17 to age 65, they'll be worth $4.3 million. Don't do anything else. Just do that, and you'll change that kid's world. I hope you've enjoyed today. I love you.
Just a real quick statement before you go. There are no pictures upstairs in the reception area, so please, the tours are free. The National Archives have free tour guides that'll give you questions, but just no pictures. They will take your phone from you if you take pictures. We'll go upstairs. You'll be led upstairs to follow the exhibits. Yeah, there'll be guides and passes up there. Thank you all so much.
Love you all.